Good evening. Today's January 3rd, 2025. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Very exciting meeting. We have the Milton Planning Board in attendance in person. I think we might have one person on Zoom. And tonight we're going to be discussing some of the zoning planning bylaws that are coming forward at our special town meeting at the end of this month. Karen, could you call the roll?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Lori Connolly, Liz Dillon, Jay Fundling, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell is on Zoom, Aman Nagasi is on Zoom, Ronald Sia and Judy Steele are also on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Okay, and the planning board, it's been so nice to come down here and meet us in the Blute Room. They have also posted a meeting for today, so we're going to allow them to go through their procedural hoops in just a moment. But are there any hands raised, Karen?
No. Judy raised her hand.
Before the planning board comes forward, if you just allow us, I'd like to recognize Judith Steele, member of the Warrant Committee. Judy.
Hi, Mr. Chair. And if I may, I would like to share something with the committee this evening.
You can.
Thank you. On January 22nd last week, when we were discussing the senior means tax credit, specifically on January 22nd, I made a comment to Nick Milano, our town administrator, in regards to the tax increase of 2.5% that actually happens every year. And it was inappropriate for me to state it. I caught you, Nick. I'm not sure why I did that, but I did. And I regret that I made that comment, as I did not mean to imply any wrongdoing on the part of the town administrator or his staff, or actually anyone in town government in our town. The Proposition 2.5 law allows municipalities to raise their taxes by not more than 2.5% annually. Our town, as many other towns surrounding us, go through this very rigorous process every year. I appreciate the town administrator's work and thoroughness in his explanations to the Warrant Committee on a variety of topics. I have discussed this matter with the chair, you, Mr. Caldwell, and with the town administrator, Mr. Milano. And I promise to be more mindful of my comments and interactions moving forward. So I regret making this comment on so many levels, and I regret that it may have offended anyone on this committee during these discussions. I really do enjoy working with everyone here, and I think we do a great job on the Warrant Committee. And I just want to thank everyone on the committee, and Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate that, and I believe probably the committee does also, and thank you. Okay, that being said, planning board, if you'd like to come up, you're invited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Introduce everyone. Things on the screen. That's a possibility.
Okay, if I sit here, so.
Of course.
So everyone can see. We'll be referring to this.
Okay. Oh.
Or a little closer? Yeah. So everyone can see.
Limit how far it can go.
Okay. That's great. That's great. So everyone. All right. Good evening. I'd like to now call the meeting to order for the Milton Planning Board. With us tonight, we have 2 members in person and 1 in Zoom. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Maggie Field member.
Cheryl Tagayas, I'm the planning board secretary.
And we have Jim Davis, remote.
Jim Davis, member.
Great. And Meredith Hall serving as chair. We also have staff with us. Cheyenne, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Diane Frazier, Assistant Director for Planning.
And Julia? Julia, I think, might be joining us at some point. Or
No, I'm here. Yeah, Julia Getman, clerk.
Great, thank you. So our staff, who will also be joining us this evening, we're happy to be with you to discuss the 3 zoning articles that will be on the February town meeting. I believe on your agenda, the first item you have is the site plan approval zoning article.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that I really would like to defer to you, Meredith, and your board in terms of the ADU site plan, and then I know we had kind of a housekeeping overlay article. We've discussed the overlay article. Frankly, we just didn't have time. If you want to start with that, it might be the easiest one. And I know that as to the ADU and the site plan, we probably have a lot to talk about, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe we jump into the site plan and ADU and then just end with the easy one.
No, that's like,
It's always depending on the time, because I know you all have so much to talk about this evening, and that is sort of a very simple, sort of straightforward article.
sure, I leave that to you.
That's
fine.
great. And what I thought we would do this evening, and Cheyenne, you've been promoted as a panelist. Would you be able to pull up the draft of the site plan review article?
Yes.
That would be great, that we sent over to the warrant committee, just to make sure. And then I know, Jay, you had sent over some red line comments. I want to go through everything line by line, because I'm sure all of you have different comments. And I think what this will really be helpful when we are going through the site plan approval is to sort of understand what a site plan approval is. I know for Jay, we just had a conversation over the weekend, and he didn't realize that most communities have a site plan review article or zoning. We actually currently already have a site plan review. The article that we're proposing is a substitute, because what we found is the language in our current article is very vague. It's not specific. So when a developer or an applicant comes before us, we have things that are typical that we would ask them in conditions which are within reason, but they're not in the technically our zoning. So this is more for clarification and to simplify the roadmap when an applicant comes before us. The times when site plan approval are used can vary. Frequently, site plan approval will come before us under a Dover Amendment use. And a Dover Amendment would be, say, a preschool. Currently, we have recently had on Central Avenue the Goddard School, which was where the Hoosick Club was. That was under the Dover Amendment. We currently are looking at the Gardner School on Blue Hill Ave. That's under the Dover Amendment. We had a small property on Robbins which was really a fruit stand, a structure. And that was under the Dover Amendment. A lot of people said, well, why couldn't you just deny that? The reason is because it's under the Dover Amendment. So typically, what we can do is we can add conditions to improve the project, improve the site, but really, we're very limited in being able to deny a Dover Amendment project. A church would be another example. It would have to be something that we felt strongly enough that it could be held up in court, would be the only way we could deny it. We've never seen a denial because it's considered by right. Now the new ADU article is going to be also, is now falling under that protected use of under the Dover Amendment. So for that reason, unless there was something so extreme that there was a reason, and it would really probably be the building commissioner who would deny it, not the planning board for an ADU situation. But we'll go through a lot of those items. But there are also times when a site is a very unusual site. For 440 Granite, for example, that did not need a special permit, but it needed site plan review because of the structure of the way the site was laid out, and very limited in what a use could be used there. Often we have what will be a special permit alongside, at the same time, a site plan approval. So that would be an example when we did recently the memory care project at 111 Highland. That was a special permit and site plan approval together. Sometimes there's situations where a special permit is needed from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the planning board will work sort of in parallel. We work independently. They're working on the special, a special permit on that property, and we're doing a site plan approval piece. And we sort of work along the same timelines to end up with a permitted use for a site. So the Hendry's building, that was site plan approval and special permit. The 36 Central was a combination of both. So sometimes you'll see it in conjunction with a special permit and site plan approval. But there are times, such as the Dover Amendment, where they stand alone and other items that are in the article. So with that, I'll go through, and I just wanted the members also to feel free to add things when we're going through, or questions if people want to add items.
Yeah,
Do you
if
wanna
you
add
don't,
something to that?
I'll
Yeah.
add a little bit. What the bylaw, as we propose it, really sets better expectations for an applicant, for neighbors, and serves as a roadmap for the board in making decisions. So right now, our site plan approval section of the bylaw is very short, and it doesn't have the requirements for submittal as detailed as we have, and as we have asked applicants. So in practice, when we've asked applicants for things, we haven't been on necessarily sound footing, and some of our decisions, we feel a bit tied, our hands tied a little bit, if the applicants point specifically to the bylaw and say, well, we met the bylaw. So we want to improve the bylaw. And it's really, I've been on the board for 10 years, and it's been on my list of things to want to work on, and so I'm really happy that we were able to do it, and I'd really be pleased if it passes and becomes our new method of approving these. The other thing I wanted to mention is there's a section of the current bylaw, and this is staying consistent with that, but we're adding a little bit when it has to do with businesses. And the reason for it is different kinds of businesses can have different kinds of impacts on neighbors, and that's really the portion that we look at. And there's specifically has been noise, traffic, access, service, odors, lighting, et cetera. And that's why the business piece of this is in here, as well as the protected use Dover Amendment.
So I was just going to say, I am in a unique position because not only am I a planning board member, but I have a special permit and a site plan approval permit. So I have been through the process, and so I am sympathetic to applicants, and I think having a roadmap makes life so much easier, and it puts all applicants in town on the same playing field. So it's frustrating as a business owner in town to see different businesses having different conditions and mitigation requests. So I think it's great as a business owner in town, and then as a planning board member, I think it's great because it gives us a tool to help an applicant, and they know what's expected before they even put an application in. So I think it's great from both perspectives. Some people might think it could be restrictive as an applicant, or we're trying to discourage or limit, but it really is really helpful. So even before I would fill out an application, I knew what was expected, and it would save a lot of time, and it would save a lot of money up front. So I do hope that you support it as we do.
Jim? Oh, Jim? Yes. If you'd like to add.
Yeah, real quick. So I agree with my board 100%, and I just want to reiterate that, one of the things, although I was late, I wasn't on the planning board when 440 Granite was approved. That neighborhood, East Milton Square, was really looking for a process, so they knew what to expect when something that big comes down the pike and is being developed next to them. And I think this site plan review really nails it, and not only protects, allows the planning board enough, I guess, ammunition to do our job, helps out the applicants so they know what to expect, but also really helps out the residents so they know what to expect. And I think it's very important that this be passed. You know, I'm not one for 9 more pages of regulation, but I think it's very important. And I think, I think we did a pretty good job here, and I'd love to see it passed. So, thank you.
Wait, Cheyenne, can you enlarge it just a little bit for those who are maybe watching, and myself? Who can't see? Who can't see? There, that's great. So going through, we have the first section is our purpose. And this purpose was really derived, I think primarily from some other language that we had in other ADUs. One thing to mention, because every site plan approval, that most municipalities do have site plan approval, we did a lot of research looking at what other communities have done and what would work and what would fit into Milton. So I don't know if anyone has any question on the purpose here. And I can read it if you would like. The purpose of this section is to protect the health, safety, convenience, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the town by providing a means to determine whether a proposed use of land or structure is in compliance with sound site utilization principles relative to traffic circulation and safety, pedestrian safety and access, off-street parking and loading, emergency vehicle access, stormwater drainage, screening, signage, exterior lighting, visual impact of parking, storage and other service areas, and consistency with the character and scale of surrounding landscape and buildings. So I think that sort of sums up everything that we were trying to say. The next section is the applicability. This, and just to let everybody know, Town Council has already reviewed this, and we, at our last meeting, if there were any comments that we had, we did make adjustments to them. So I know there's been some question on the language, I think on number B, AC Vine, and please stop me if anyone here has any questions, but on B, the first line, whenever the site plan is required under the provisions of this chapter, the procedures set forth in this section shall be followed. And Jay had a comment that he wanted to change this to the activities and uses which require site plan approval by the planning board include but are not limited to. And then we have 4 items. Jay had reduced it down to 3. This section, I don't think that we can change that. I talked to the other board members, but by adding, because I think what you're really saying is include but not are limited to the following items, that expands it in an open way that I think would be considered out of scope. We would have to check that with Town Council.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Yeah, the reason I said that is because, I mean, first I saw the ADU article would put somewhere else in the bylaws, this requires a site plan. And I thought, oh, are there other places in the bylaws say this requires a site plan? And there are. The PUDs and the great estates and landscaping businesses all say these require a site plan. So I didn't want to have other places in the bylaws say these require a site plan, but then here, and it does not say it's only these 4 things. So maybe that gets us out of trouble. But I don't want to imply that it's only these 4 things.
And I appreciate your intent on why you were saying. I understood why you were asking that.
Yeah, I think we could ask Town Council for his opinion about that, because you're right, site plan review is triggered in other sections of the bylaw. However, in those sections, it's coming also with a special permit. And I know these terms we kind of are just throwing at you, but they have, special permit is a process established at the state level, and site plan approval doesn't have that same, I guess, state level requirements. It's town by town. So since it is a legal matter, I do think it's Town Council's opinion should be sought on that.
And I think the only thing you wanted to take out, what we had, is number 3, and you moved it to, it was actually our number 4, and you wanted to make it number 3? Do you have a purpose in
Couple
taking
comments.
that out? Yeah.
I didn't want to take anything out. It was more of a style thing. It was more, number 1 is something we cover, number 2 is something we cover, number 3 is something we don't cover, and number 4 is something we cover. I just wanted to change the order. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. So I didn't intend to take anything out.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's, okay, great.
But
I think you had a question about why, if it's interior work, that we are adding this.
I do have a couple questions about what's covered.
Yes.
I don't know when.
Oh, no, please. Do you think now's a good time to discuss?
Well,
Because
now we're on number 4, so yes, because that was something that, I did get an opinion from town council, and it was something that Jay brought up, that he noted that when we're substituting the old 12.4 with this new 12.4, we added the language to ours saying, interior work causing any change of use or size shall be excluded from the site plan review requirement with the exception of a restaurant, bar, or entertainment use. In another section, which is zoning 275 3.3F, there is language which just ends with interior work causing any change, use, or size shall be excluded from this site plan review requirement, period. So the end, if restaurant, bar, exception of restaurant, bar, or entertainment use, that's added to this, but it's different from what is in a different section. So asked town council how he would address that, because it would be out of scope for us to amend section 3.3F, because we've already submitted this article, and it's gone to the warrant. So rather than, because we cannot amend that at this time, what we can do is, at the suggestion of town council and if my board, the board agrees, this was Peter Mello's suggestion, that at the end of saying, with the exception of restaurant, comma, bar, or entertainment use, comma, notwithstanding any other zoning bylaw provisions to the contrary. So as long as it doesn't contradict anything else, it can go into effect. So when we go, so rather than having to go back and amend this language, we can amend the other at a future meeting, but we can keep this language as is.
With those additional words?
With those additional words.
Are you intending for us to vote on this as a planning board
Well, I
tonight?
just wanted to, does anyone have any concerns with that?
Wait, could you read that again?
And we could have Cheyenne do a red line on that, and, so, Cheyenne, can you edit,
Welcome to the planning board.
I know, we won't do this for every item.
oh, please do. I love it.
After number 4, Cheyenne, excluding.
Why we go very
single
late.
family. So we would just say, make that a comma. And then everyone can look at this. Notwithstanding any other zoning bylaw, capitalized zoning and bylaw, provisions to the contrary. Period.
Doesn't that go up in number 3, though, not number 4?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Shireen, sorry. Okay. Use. Use, comma, notwithstanding. Any other zoning bylaw provisions to the contrary.
The question, does this now become a recommendation of the warrant committee since we've submitted it as a planning board to the warrant committee? Since we voted it at our last meeting?
Well, I think we would like support of any changes, so maybe we should go through all of our amendments, and then the warrant committee could, you all could propose it as amended, what
Yes.
we've given, because we'll have to do a green sheet on this, so that way you can approve rather than going item by item.
Yep.
But first, is that something the planning board would support, that change, and based on the town council's advice? And Jim, would you agree on
I
that?
like it. I think it's great.
Change?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So just to be formal because we're not all together, just a roll call vote. If I could have a motion to amend.
Are we going to have others? Are we going to do them
Yeah, maybe one
line by
motion.
line? Or are we going to do them at the end if we have any other
Maybe we
amendments?
should go at the end and do ours at the end too.
Right.
Yeah, do them
Okay.
all
That
at
makes-
once.
Yeah, that would be more efficient. Okay, all right. Okay, any questions on that?
I have another question about this one. And I'm not sure if I'm reading it right or if this was intended. It looks like the old site plan, what this is replacing. The old site plan, as I'm reading it, it said, if there's a commercial building and you're changing more than 800 square feet, you need a site plan. And the new one, it says, if you're making any change to a building more than 800 square feet, you need a site plan. And we had fun before the meeting started. This room is a little bit bigger than 800 square feet, just for context. So if I read this, what I think is, let's say you have a business that's more than 800 square feet. Let's say they're changing their entrance, which is small, less than 800 square feet. I think if I read it right, in the old rules, they would not need a site plan. And in the new rules, they would, because they're making a change to a building that's more than 800 square feet. I guess my first question is that what you intended?
My understanding from, I don't have the old language in front of me, but those did come to us for site plan approval, anything 800 square feet. That's actually what triggered 440 Granite Ave. It's what triggers the Milton Marketplace. It's what triggered building on Adams Street previously that Falcone owned.
Citizen
It's,
Bank,
yeah, it's triggered many, is that alteration to a commercial building,
Any alteration, big or small?
right? Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, some of them were, if you look at Milton Marketplace, adding an exterior staircase, it is something to consider, but we haven't found that sometimes an application that I haven't found anything, let's say, that is so minor that it hasn't really been beneficial to have some level of review in my experience. But that's not to say there couldn't be something at that level.
Can I ask you a question? And thanks for explaining it. That really helped me because I was thinking of the Milton Marketplace in my head as well. So this would cover that. So because they would be proposing to have a bar, restaurant, right? They're going to do that. So that would trigger a site plan, right?
That's really
That's the intent,
what
right?
prompted us to add
Yeah.
that.
That's
is
what
that-
jumped off the page for me.
Yes.
I thought,
The expansion of use,
Yeah.
which then triggered that they actually need to go to the zoning board of appeals, which is really what's taking, because everyone's like, what's taking so long? It's because I think they didn't realize that they needed both site plan approval, but they also need to amend their special permit. That's an
Gotcha.
example, because it's a residential neighborhood zone, and so.
gotcha.
it
Thank
triggered-
you.
It triggered both, yeah.
I was gonna ask about this, so I think you might have just explained it, Meredith, but, so this big B, little b 3, interior work. So the original bylaw says, interior renovation work that makes no change in the exterior appearance of a commercial building shall be excluded from this site plan review requirement. So that would be if they were changing the interior of Milton Market. So if they were just changing the interior of the plate, for example, or the restaurant, the space that used to be the plate. Here, but of course they built out, so this still would have been under the site plan. So am I correct that here now, anytime there would be, I just want to make sure I understand. So anytime there would be interior work for a restaurant, bar, entertainment, then that would fall under here, would still be required to get site plan review, which is broader than what's in the original. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Because it triggers a higher use level.
Yep.
Loading zones, things that could be triggered, like loading, parking, things that would have a greater effect.
Right.
Because of the.
Yeah, even our parking requirements are different for restaurant use than other commercial use, so we felt as if it was a beneficial trigger
And
to
those,
add.
sorry, Cheryl. Those 3, restaurant, bar, entertainment use, I'm just curious about the thought process of limiting it to those 3, because here, it's a commercial building, so it's any commercial building unless the exterior. So I was just interested in why those 3 were called out.
One, Meredith, may I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
We were thinking that it's the numbers of people and therefore the level of impact
Okay.
that it could be for abutters.
Okay.
And possibly the noise
Yeah, I was gonna say-
generated.
Sorry, Jim, you also had your.
I was just going to jump in and say that in the hours, typically bar restaurants are open later. So it's nice to have a shot at curbing that for the residents.
Yes, Jay?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the details in the subsequent pages, which I'm glad we have so many details, but it does look like you're expanding what you're doing a site plan review on 4 items. One is the 800 square feet thing, which we just discussed, and maybe that's just bringing it into line with reality. Another thing is, I don't think you previously covered commercial parking lots, but now you are. That seems reasonable to me. The third one is you're covering ADUs now, which we know why that's new. I might have questions about that. I don't know if it should be on this or the ADU article. And then the fourth one is the restaurants. And I think that might be the place where you get the most you might get the most disagreement among town meeting or among the warrant committee with the planning board. Because let's say we're talking about something in a business district, it wouldn't require any other permit. I like Peel Pizza. Let's say Peel Pizza goes away and is replaced with another restaurant tomorrow. If they're not making any external changes, one could say, let's be business friendly. And, you're taking out one restaurant, putting another restaurant in the same place. Somebody could say, let's not make them go through this process. I know we're not really debating things yet among ourselves, but this might be the hottest point of all
Go ahead,
this.
because
Yeah, if you've watched any of the proposals in East Milton, you will see that the impacts of these uses vary quite a bit. So is there valet? Is there a lot of takeout? Is the business breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And so the impacts on the neighborhood are different for those different types of uses. Although the uses, it's in a business district. Our business districts are very small, and they're very close to all residents, so they that are in that area, in the vicinity of the business district. So the impacts spread out beyond the 1 or 2 streets of the business districts. And we, as a board, have heard a lot from neighbors about that. And this is really responsive to what our experience has been on the board, the concerns of residents. And it's not so much that people are opposed, but they want to make sure that things are addressed, their concerns are addressed in the applications and in the operations and the proposals. And so we have felt that it's something that would be beneficial and to keep it in this proposal.
And I would just say loading zones are the best example. That can vary what a coffee shop might need versus what Abbey Park or Navarra might need for loading zones. So it can vary, and that's just one of the biggest impact to the East Milton neighborhood. That is, there was a loading zone that was lost that we're trying to re-implement and put back because it's a problem with trucks just stopping in the middle of the road and all over East Milton Square and really wreaking havoc on an area that already has so much congestion and traffic. So that's just one example, but there's...
Yeah, and I'll just add, again, Milton Marketplace, the operation of the plate, they had deliveries that came in small vehicles, whereas the deliveries for the proposed restaurant are going to be different than that. And so, that's a significant change, and, how can that be looked at and managed for surface zone, et cetera. So there are degrees of impacts to these kinds of businesses that I don't think you get from, let's say, a store or another kind of commercial use.
Hey, Liz, is it okay? Do you have a comment or a question?
Okay. So I really appreciate that the planning board has taken into consideration some of the comments from East Milton. as an East Milton person myself. So thank you for that, because I have watched all of those meetings and I know that that's the case. So I appreciate that. My question was, so the cost of all of this. So I appreciate having this sort of more spelled out, because I do think that it will provide people who are going through this process with more clarity. But a lot of this is probably going to be kind of expensive. You would know the costs on the front end a little bit. Have you thought at all about the possible impact on small local businesses versus like locally owned Milton businesses versus is this going to bring in larger businesses that can absorb the cost? Then I had a second question, which was enforcement. So people can promise all kinds of things, but as we've seen, sometimes even in East Milton, it's not really your responsibility. But I'm just thinking about when we have these requirements and people put their best efforts forward in the plan, you know, how are we making sure that people are going to follow through with actually putting the plants that they're supposed to do, with actually having the rodent control, with actually doing the things that they promised to have? So
That's always been a challenge, is the enforcement piece
Maybe
of
not
things.
your
And no, we're actually having, you know, that's part of what we're looking at and having to deal with too. That has not been, some of those items have not been addressed. But as far as cost, I would almost like to get further through the site plan, because I think it will start making sense.
Okay.
Because when we talk about some of the requirements for the application, there's a big difference in an application that would be a memory care, for example, or a larger a kindergarten, you know, a school that would need civil engineering, you know, that would need peer review, traffic studies, very, you know, things that would be more consultant-driven. Most of the things that you're going to see with the ADU are requirements that the building department is going to require anyway. So they're going to need a plot plan. They're going to need, because you're going to need to know what your setbacks are. You're going to need a licensed architect, because you're going to have to know exact square footage, because there is a limit when we get to the ADU. We can discuss that more. The building department is going to need plans for electrical, you know, the various utilities. Those are all going to be required, and it will be part of our review, but those are going to be necessary anyway. Somebody just can't put an ADU in and do it without a building permit. So all those things, there's going to be requirements. So what we're doing is sort of complementing what the building department is also going to, what they normally ask, because an applicant who is filing through the building department is going to get sent back and say, go back, you need to come and you need those, because they can't go out with a measuring tape and say, okay, what are these dimensions? It has to be provided by somebody who's not just me at home drawing my living, you know, a certain carve out. So it has to be done in a way that those costs, because I think that's the really concern, is smaller businesses or individual homeowners. Those aren't costs that we're asking for. We're not asking for, you know, traffic studies from a little. It's a significant project that would be triggering those, and it would be appropriate for that. And typically those applicants come in already prepared, and often they'll already have architects, landscape architects, you know, as part of their presentation plans that they're bringing in.
So, you know, I'm a small business owner. I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So I am very well aware of all the costs. And what is frustrating as an applicant is not knowing what the costs are going to be. So having a plan up front is way better than every time you go to a planning board meeting. You maybe need an attorney, you maybe need to have your engineer there. You do a design, and then it gets changed. It's all those little changes which become very costly. So having a plan up front and is much more beneficial as a small business owner than having a long, drawn-out process. Right now, the process can be so long and drawn out, and things change, different things come up, seasons change. So we are very aware of the cost to small business owners.
And
Because that is what our town wants. I am a huge proponent of locally owned. I actually would love to see no chain stores come to the town, because I believe that locally owned business is the lifeblood of our economy, not just here, but of the US. So I think anything we can do to help help the process along is a worthy endeavor.
one thing that I think will save costs for all businesses, small and large, is number C, or letter C, which is the pre-application opportunity. So one of the nursery daycare centers came in with a full application, and we said, gee, why didn't you take advantage of a pre-file meeting and get some feedback first? And they said, we didn't see that provision in your bylaw. And so we really think that this would be beneficial, because they now had to go back and re-engineer it. And one other thing I'll just point out in terms of costs is that we did try and put in some triggers for certain requirements, and then we also left in an opportunity to waive any particular requirement. So if an applicant can come in at this pre-file session or conference, and having looked at these requirements, make a request to have some waived. And then during the hearing, if we find that we actually need something that we've waived, we can request it then. So we do think that this provides opportunity for being efficient and costs, and that should be save costs for applicants.
Yeah, just a question. I like how you've got it broken out, section B. I would suggest you start using Roman numerets though to break it out a little further. All right. But I do like how you've got it called out, and you've got these gates that you go through to trigger ZBA, et cetera, and things like that. We've talked a little bit about East Milton, some of the impacts, and thank you, Cheryl, for looking out the comments you made. That was well. I appreciate that. I look at the pre-application, and if I scan down to capital D, little d, way down, sorry. Subsection 4.5, no, I'm just kidding. Page 29, 13. My question is around parking. All right, so one of the biggest things we always hear about is traffic studies, and there must be the most amazing traffic study ever pulled, because it's reused all the time. So my suggestion would be consider a provision to have a timeline on that traffic study, because the last one was pulled during COVID, so might be a little sus, as the kids would say, right? Then I would say looking at parking, right? So we look at the impact of what's happening with the residences in East Milton, right? We're losing 4 spots on that spot. What I would love to see, and I know we're not asking for revisions right now perhaps, but I'd like to see some more rigor around that. Triggering traffic study with parking, right? Can the building park itself? You know, pretty easy question, right? You look at 440 Granite. It does park itself. It's got enough room there. If you start looking at some of the other ones, it gets a little more challenged, and then the overflow goes into the neighborhood. So for consideration, as you look at it, potentially adding some gates, it'll push it into another consideration, purposely calling out parking. I see there's a parking analysis there, but it's not clear to me, you know, on that. If I'm missing, I apologize. I'm just trying to, I think it would be helpful.
Well noted.
Well, we depend on our peer review for our parking, so to your point of whenever any applicant has provided their traffic analysis, it all says the same. There's no significant impact in the neighborhood. And it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in.
No.
And there's few
Yeah.
traffic.
And there's also, when it comes to site plan review, because I'll address this, because that is the number one thing we hear from any neighborhood in town, and even, I mean, especially East Milton, I know it's a concern, but it is a concern in other neighborhoods too, and they'll say, and Blue Hill Ave, for example, which is a nightmare, the neighbors were saying, do we have a traffic study? And they did a traffic study. They did it in the summertime, which around 4th of July weekend, which we find is also a time. We asked them to go back and revise that. The problem is, it is almost impossible to deny something on site plan review because of traffic. And believe me, the 40B projects, everything, it was always a huge issue, but there's just case law that it's going to be, if you try to do it, it will be appealed and it will be turned over, that decision for parking. It's just, I mean, in traffic. Parking, we do try to.
Parking's different.
Yeah, traffic is the issue where that's an example where we do traffic studies, but I hear what you're saying, that
Well,
it
they're
does.
both trigger words, right?
They're
So
both
you say-
trigger-
You
absolutely.
say parking or you say traffic. And enforcement, my
enforcement,
colleague called out there is a great one.
Yeah.
We just looked at that last week with some of the enforcement, that it falls back on the police to go in there and or the
is.
select board to enforce something. I mean, you know.
I know, I pulled up, there was a loading truck
Nerve-wracking.
in front of Brugger, parked right
Yeah.
to the left of Brugger's as everybody's trying to get into Bassett Street. And then there was,
every day.
I don't know if it was somebody doing Uber Eats or if somebody had New Jersey plates, but then pulled over and just put their flashers on. So it literally was one lane for everybody trying to get in and out of Bassett Street. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was just already, a gridlock. So enforcement, and I hear you. So, yeah, that's
Those are the-
good to keep thinking about how we can make that language better.
So I think we need to add personnel for enforcement. So we do have the local enforcement is the building inspector's office, and they have an enforcement. And it is, unfortunately, it's up to the neighbors or to the residents to call, and the enforcement officer. So you kind of have to police, but maybe if the calls come in, then the enforcement officer will be out there more regularly. Or we just put in for somebody else.
And it's almost 8 o'clock, so I do want, we're only on the first
Keep going,
page,
keep
so.
going.
Meredith, can I just
do wanna
clarify,
add,
though?
yeah, so-
I just want to clarify on Dover Amendment uses, they still are required to meet the zoning requirements. And so there is a zoning requirement for parking, for example. And so if they weren't meeting a zoning requirement on, I know there was something, a question about what we mean by dimensional standards, but if they would then need to go for variance to, if they don't meet the zoning. So the use is protected, but we still have review of the way the use is being proposed to be put on a piece of property, and that includes the way the parking is. Not just the number of spaces, if that meets zoning. We can question whether they really need as many spaces as they're proposing, as in the case of
Gardner School.
the Gardner School. So,
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the lawn piece and reducing what we've asked for them to reduce. So Jay, there was one more item that if we scroll down back to in C, where it says, this meeting may also provide an opportunity to discuss the procedures, waiver requests, and information the board will need to coordinate reviews if the development requires the other town approvals. Jay had sort of, let's see, where are we in here? Other town approvals and request impact analysis such as traffic study. I think what you wanted was just to break up that sentence.
Yeah, I just found it a little hard to read. I added the word "of" in the middle there, and I broke up the sentence, yes.
So I think it would still have to be if, to coordinate
Coordinate
reviews if the development requires other town approvals, period? And then you said you wanted to have a new sentence, at this meeting, the board may also request impact analysis such as a traffic study. So you wanted to put town
Yeah, I mean,
approvals, period.
I gave it to you in writing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what
if-
you-
I don't want to spend other people's time. parsing grammar. That was my suggestion. You can take it or leave it.
Well, that becomes my question, whether it's at this point, it has to be what's in your recommendation, because it's been submitted for printing in the warrant. It's kind of now in your recommendation and not in ours, because our language has been submitted. So any of these
Approved by,
changes.
Town council.
Right, and reviewed by town council. So any of these changes that you're proposing, we would suggest you get town council to review as well, that would go into the recommendation. But, so, I'm just suggesting it's not for the planning board to decide to make this change at this point in time any longer.
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I think one possibility is the planning board could take it back and look at the things I suggested and say, we like some of these, we don't like some of these, and then bring it back to us, fully baked, and say, here, after.
We don't have a public hearing on this until the 20th in town meeting, so I think it's late to try to do that.
Just for grammatical, right? So this is just a grammatical.
Change that would be requested.
Yes.
I have no problem with that, but it's just simply, Cheyenne, I think, had,
Well, are there other,
it would have to be subject to.
more substantive changes that are more important to you than a grammatical?
Probably.
I guess on,
Yes, so,
my sug-
to save time. I'm not, I know words matter. And, my mother was a teacher, grammar's important. But at this point in time, I think it might be a little bit late, and if we, in the future, we could keep his suggestions.
I think we should go through the questions and suggestions. But I think something that's grammatical at this point, the thing I think about, like green sheets or recommendations, is how different are they from what the original language is? And the more different they are, the more doubt it casts. And I don't think for something that's grammatical, I would like to see a lot of doubt cast. We have spent some time on this, and we sent it to town council some time ago. The language in here has been this way for some time, unlike the ADU one, maybe. But, so, when things get sent back for further study, which is what I'm trying to avoid,
We don't want that.
they tend to not come back for a while. And so,
Yeah, so, right. Then I think let's move through this and just other comments and that Jay had brought up. So if we move on to the next page, and we scroll down, plans and plan content, under that, we've got submission, application form, plans and plan content. Under number 6, Jay, you had asked about providing grading when it goes down to site plans that show setbacks, the position of the buildings on the site, buildings, setback dimensions, point of vehicular access, and so forth. It goes down to proposed parking and proposed grading, retaining walls, and then the last part of that sentence is, and other information commonly required for site plan approval. So you thought that seemed general and open-ended. Town council did approve that, and Cheryl, I don't know if you want to address that in this language too.
that,
Anyone else?
yeah, I mean, that just gives us
If something that
catch-all.
was if something that was forgotten that was not mentioned in here, in the site plan approval.
And every site can be a little bit different, and so you might not know what you might need until you get there. It's like when you get on a job, when we get on a landscape job, where you can predict what is needed, but you don't always know what's needed. So you want to be able to, keep it a little bit open-ended and allow for flexibility.
So that's why that was in there, just, but, yeah.
That raised another question for me, thank you. Is this fairly standard with the things that your board would review prior to having it all written down? So is this kind of consistent with the things that you would have looked at anyway but that weren't like
Yes,
kind
exactly.
of codified, if you will, in the
Exactly.
bylaw. So this is what people could have expected. They just didn't, I mean, to your point, Maggie, they just didn't know. So this just
Right.
brings that clarity forth ahead of time.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, you know, I think at this moment in time, our board actually has a really solid group of professionals who bring something different to the table, and we've all kind of, you know, have honed in on different things. And so, like for instance, on number 8, the caliper size of trees, you know, that's important to me. And
We found that on projects that we
We
have to
found
be
it,
more
correct.
specific about, because they'll come in with little twigs, you know, and try to say, okay, this is your buffer screening, and it's, and, or the planting plan that goes along with it, and you look at the, you know, in front of the Goddard School and the trees have died, you know, we have to, if we have that plan, that site plan, we can go back and say, this is, you promised the neighbors this buffer, and now there's dead trees, so you are you need to come in and replace that for your neighbors. That's a real situation where the landscape piece is important, and to your point, the size.
size matters.
So that's where so that was the next item. You were just wanting to did you want to change the word from total existing trees to all existing trees? That seemed.
I didn't understand what it meant.
Yeah.
I assume caliper means size of total I just didn't understand what it meant.
Yeah, and that's also, Conservation Commission uses that as a standard tool. It's measured, you know, at breast height. The caliper of your trees are measured at breast height. And so, we're trying to work with other boards and what is their accepted.
So this also comes to when you're making a decision about what's an acceptable or adequate level of landscape screening, what are you measuring it by? And so one way to measure it is against what's been lost. And so that's the reason for the calculated caliper of the existing trees and of those being removed. And then you can say, well, you're removing half of the trees that are on the property by size, and therefore our expectation is that you will replace XYZ. But if you don't have your starting points, then you don't have as much information for your decision-making.
But it's a good question, Jay. So now bumping down to number 13, where it says parking and transportation demand management plan, as described in 275-20.5. You were asking why that was referenced here. It's parking and transportation demand management plan. That would be in the case, which we were talking maybe, in East Milton Square, where valet parking would be needed because there wasn't ample parking off-site or on-site. It could also be bike storage. It might be a really dense area that you want to encourage having a bike storage so that that residents use bikes. One thing that we've recommended recently is we've talked about bus passes, that we want maybe that it's a new condo building that they offer the residents of the building a bus pass so that they can go and travel without having to park a vehicle. So feel free to jump in also with other things, but those are the type of examples that when we're asking if it's a really dense location that parking demand, that they think about that and to take as many cars off the road as possible if parking is limited in that area. So the next, jumping down to number 17, which relates to, because sometimes we'll run up against a wetland situation, such as up on Highland Street or some other areas that we need the Conservation Commission to also weigh in on. So this is the determination of applicability issued and notice of intent filed with the Conservation Commission. So sometimes in conjunction with our site plan approval, that's not under our authority. So we'll need the Conservation Commission to weigh in, and we'll need a letter asking, have they done a drainage? Like, have they done borings? What did they think will be further required from consultants and civil engineers to study that site, to make sure that there's enough water retention or recharge on the site, and it's the water, because our biggest concern is that water is not going to flood into a neighbor's property, so.
Yeah. My comment there, and may not be, it may be a problem with the website. I just couldn't find chapter 15 of the
Yeah,
bylaws.
I think that's a leftover before the codification, the recodification where the numbering systems all changed. I looked it up. It is the wetlands section. I think it's section 260. So that would definitely want to change from chapter 15 to section 260, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So it should read section 260 of the general bylaws of the town of Milton.
Of the town of Milton, right.
Cheyenne, could you put that in as that item?
Okay.
Yeah, when we switched to the recodification, it moved and renumbered things, so that maybe.
So we just so far have two things to,
Okay, great, look at that, Cheyenne, great.
Could you repeat the number? Sorry, my mouse was dying, so I couldn't unmute myself. in
Are you
time.
looking it up, Jay? Am I correct? I looked this up earlier. Was it section 260?
260 says wetlands, yeah.
Wetlands, it's section 260, Cheyenne.
It says chapter. Does that matter if it's
Chapter,
chapter?
you're
or
right.
section?
Chapter. Chapter.
Just checking.
Yeah, I don't have it open in front of me, so.
And so the next question Jay had is, in reading, all site plans shall be prepared by a licensed architect, landscape architect, and civil engineer. That's intended to be licensed, all of those are licensed.
If
But you wanna
it's further clarified if in the next, or
Sentence.
I think in the sentence,
All
Disciplines licensed in the Commonwealth.
yeah.
So I think we can keep that language the same.
And then getting back to the question of how much does it cost to have this done? Is that if the architect could plug her ears for a second, is that an unnecessary expense, saying that it needs to be done by a licensed architect?
so it can
Could be done by somebody else.
Isn't this one of the waived ones?
Well, whether it's licensed also in the building code is that there's triggers, whether you require a license or not. The thing that was triggering this is that we don't want somebody doing their own site plan and saying the building's 10 feet away from the property line, when you need the civil engineer to certify that. On the landscape plan, we were getting civil engineers doing landscape design that they're not qualified to do. So we want qualified people preparing the plans that we're reviewing. Now, whether you think that's an extra expense or not, it depends on the level of project. So if it's a project that we feel as if doesn't necessitate something like that, we can always waive it. But the starting point would be setting our expectations and then waiving it, rather than having less in here and then asking for it, and not, if someone says, well, we'd rather not because we're not obligated to, then we have no further position on it at that point.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to ask for a civil engineering for ADUs. That's typically what we need for the larger, the memory care. The Gardner School that we're looking at right now, they had proposed coming in with, a lot of cut, a lot of fill, and they also were creating an issue where they had to have a discharge, they have to show that they can only discharge so much water off the site. So they have civil engineering plans that they just automatically bring in. We didn't even have to ask them. And architects, they already come in with architectural drawings. When you have that size of a project, that's how they apply. And that's part of that pre-application process, if they're missing something, but. All right, so now we can move down to, there's procedures, which those seem fine. Outside consultants, I think we've talked about this. The reason why the language is the way it is for outside consultants. And again, reasonable costs. There's times when we will have to ask for, a civil engineer or somebody to come in to do some sort of analysis that,
I'll just say this is standard practice.
yeah.
If I can say, this was concerning to me, very concerning, because, I can imagine, a medium to large project. I mean, as you said, you can't stop a project, but you can tell a project, sorry, you know what we're going to need to do? We're going to need to hire an outside consultant, and they're going to charge $500 an hour for 500 hours. Well, you haven't denied the project, but you stopped it. So I'm not implying bad faith on the current planning board members or future planning board members. It just concerns me.
What we've
concerns me
used
too.
this for in practice, sorry, Jim?
That's good. I was just going to say it concerns me too, and that's the danger in all this. Hopefully, with the pre-application meeting and the fact that we can grant waivers, we sort of pick and choose what is needed, but sometimes things come up, and sometimes you have to make adjustments to your drainage plan, and sometimes it's a re-engineering, and it could be thousands. It's not our intent, but I don't know how to legislate around that, to be honest with you.
We have to give ourselves the opportunity on stormwater design. There are times when the town engineer reviews it and provides their opinion. Planning board members aren't civil engineers and wouldn't want to take responsibility for review of stormwater management design. And that's where we rely on the town engineer or peer review consultants. Typically, this is used for peer review consultants on traffic and on civil engineering, which is on the stormwater management. I don't think in my time on the board we've had any other consultant. When 40Bs are done, they have some of these others which are listed here. Again, these are standard practice. You'll find this in, I'm sure, in most towns' site plan approval bylaws.
Sure, would an example of that be the residents at East Milton when they had, I think it was VHB, doing water study?
Right.
Right, that would be an example of an outside consultant helping? Would that be an example?
Right, yeah, so we can also use the memory care facility on Highland, very complex stormwater management design there, and also a lot of
Civil with
concern about
retaining
traffic.
walls, a lot of
Yeah.
retaining walls, a lot of traffic. And when we can, we use our town staff. I mean, our fire department will weigh in because fire safety, obviously, egress, making sure the turning radius for a fire truck to get in and out of a site is very important. The police will have, sometimes we need the police to weigh in on something, but it's typically fire and our town engineers that we rely on. And if they can, we often will get a letter saying that they have evaluated, because we'll get the applicant will hire a consultant, but then we need someone who's an engineer to review what the consultant's provided, because we're not engineers and experts. So the engineering department will evaluate those, and then she'll provide the planning board a letter to say, yes, they've met all the things that they've needed, particularly if it's around a wetlands area situation.
And just so, what will happen, let's say, we'll use stormwater design as an example. The peer review consultant will review the work of the applicant's engineer and prepare a comment letter. And then the applicant's engineer will provide a response. Usually it's just a letter form. And they might go back and forth a couple of times until they get the issues resolved. They might change their design a little bit. Again, in my experience, it's not been major redesign, but it does give assurance to the board that an appropriate technical expert has given this a review. So that we can rely upon that in our decision.
Yeah, and our peer review is not hired by the applicant, so they're way more neutral, which I think is super important.
They're paid for by the applicant, but
yeah.
they're selected by the town.
And it
Which makes
also
it
might be the DPW that weighs in, because a lot of time, when you have a new project, which is a large project, they're tying into our existing infrastructure. So you have to make sure that the size of whatever drain that they're tying into is appropriate, and that the DPW can certify that, yes, the capacity of this water and drainage, or if there's an easement that it can be tied into that. Again, 111 Highland, they were trying to tie, they didn't have a real good tie-in. They were trying to tie into Winter Valley. So we can't evaluate that, whether it's the capacity. So that, we have the DPW to refer that. So we try to use in-house whenever we can. But many times you do need, they'll come in knowing these issues on these sizable projects like this. Yep.
I like, with respect to E and kind of throughout, I think that from a risk mitigation standpoint for the town, leaving it a little bit more discretionary is not a bad thing. Because if you start promising to people that in these circumstances, you're gonna have to engage an engineer, architect, or consultant, and in all other circumstances you won't, then as you said, Meredith, you sort of shut the door, but also you oblige the town to do certain things that people can then litigate. So that part doesn't really bother me. I think that they also obviously have the right to appeal to a court if there is, if they feel like the planning board has overstepped its authority, that's what the statute says, because I just went back and looked, then you can bring it to the court. I wonder, though, if there's a process by which they might be able to apply for kind of a reconsideration, to say, you know what, I don't know, I'm not necessarily recommending this, but in any of these instances, if you were to say, this is not going to be approved because of X, Y, Z, if they have that reconsideration. I like the fact that you discuss in advance of people spending money. I think that's good. I don't know if it's possible to do that a little bit on the back end before people have to go, God forbid, sue about it.
Well, that I think is during the public hearing process. We kind of, we do vet it. It's a back and forth, and it's a discussion, and, there are times when I've said, no, I can't afford that. In the middle of a public hearing.
Sure.
So, I think boards, I've been in front of past boards 10 years ago, different makeup. And, I think board members are pretty good.
I can't think of too many applications that have received an outright no vote. I think we work through with the applicants, and maybe they withdraw without prejudice and then reapply. So
I don't think we've
yeah.
denied anything. The only examples by right, because we're talking about the by right use, the only examples that I know of in recent were the 40B, there were 2 40B projects that were denied, and those are by right. But those were denied by the Zoning Board of Appeals because they did not provide adequate data information on the drainage and civil engineering requests that the ZBA had made.
So one thing.
So they were, but it was actually, I think, went to the DEP, and I think that it was overruled. And so the applicant, the developer, actually won the case in that, which was, I think, a surprise because I think they had to provide some more information at a later time, but originally they had not.
So the original application for 440 Granite Ave had a site plan decision that was allowed for less units than were proposed. So the applicant didn't appeal that, but rather came back with a revised application that did get approved. So that's one way, I guess an applicant has taken into consideration the planning board's comments that were not what they had hoped for, or decision that they had not hoped for.
I may just be shouting into the wind. I'm still concerned about this consultant fee. Ms. Oldfield said several minutes ago she wants predictability as a small business owner, and I think most of this document gives predictability, and I love it. But the unpredictability is, we'll need a consultant, and we'll need to charge you for it. Mr. Davis said a few minutes ago, but what else can we do? Well, you could say we're not going to charge the applicant. If we can't do the work in-house with the volunteers and with the town employees, then we're going to pay for the consultant ourselves. Yeah, shoot me because I'm suggesting the town pays for something. I guess what I'm concerned about, I had a previous boss who taught me that the language in a contract is not there for when things are going good. The language in a contract is there for when things go bad and you don't like each other and you're butting heads. And I can imagine an applicant who, for whatever reason, gets on the bad side of the planning board. And the planning board, maybe with reasonable intentions, says, all right, you jerk, we're going to have to hire a consultant. It's going to cost a lot of money. And it's a small business who can't afford it and also can't afford to sue you. If I'm setting a spark in my fellow warrant committee members, maybe this is something we'll examine more, but otherwise.
I would just say that I really hope that you would consider what we've said tonight. This has been a standard practice. This is really an important tool for the board, and it's important for the neighbors, particularly the abutters, who always are very concerned about these impacts on their properties and their lives. And having a second set of professional eyes look at this gives some assurance to those neighbors. So I would say that you should consider whether that outweighs the applicant, potentially having to spend what is really short change on this for these large projects. And in my 10 years, I haven't seen a small project where these consultants have been requested.
Yeah, this is, I do think, to Cheryl's point, it's really protection for the bigger projects. As an applicant.
Protection for the town.
It's a protection for the town, it's,
And the neighbors, yeah.
maybe I have more faith, and sometimes I have not had a lot of faith in the town of Milton. In my experience as an applicant, working with the planning department, of which there were different planners, they worked with small businesses. I hear your concern about a small business, because I am really concerned about that. But this is for the bigger projects. The town should not incur the cost of a bigger project. Just like you, planning board members are volunteers, and even though, as I mentioned, we have really qualified members of the planning board, we're really lucky, I think, who we have. We're still volunteers, and some of the projects are very big and very complex, and I think that should stay in there. And if there is a small business, I really think the planning department works with the applicants as much as possible.
Because really, the bottom line, we cannot be unreasonable, because it would not hold up in court. And I think that's what you have to, that we weigh every time we have an applicant before us, we weigh heavily, does this hold up in court? Because we're liable, neighbors sue, developers, we're very aware of that. And so not being, being within what is appropriate is, and defendable if we need it to be. So, all right, let's keep moving. The next F, or E, G, jumping down, the next question, which I think is a good question too, with the site design standards. The first, connections, under connections, sidewalks shall provide direct connections among buildings, entrances, public sidewalk, if applicable, bike storage and parking. Your question was sidewalks. Why are we, because I think your mind is going to ADU, or going towards really small things. So this is covering a multifamily housing, something that would be larger. You're saying, why do we require sidewalks? I'll just use the memory care, for example. They did not have a sidewalk in that plan, in the driveway coming in off of Highland originally. We recognized, what if there's a fire? What if there is an elderly, somebody trying to get out and walk? They only had the driveway to walk in, and this would be elderly and people with Alzheimer's, and possibly wheelchairs. So we asked, and it was one of the things actually brought up by a neighbor, is why aren't there sidewalks so somebody can get out, and maybe somebody walking up Highland Street would need to cross, so we asked for a crosswalk, and we asked for a sidewalk. That would be an example of when it's not in a plan, but for safety reasons, that's the only reason why. And I don't love adding sidewalks or concrete if at all necessary, but that was a time that it was a safety issue, and that's what that would apply to.
Sure, can I say, I hope my comments aren't dominating this at the expense of my fellow warrant committee members. I'm just wanted to say, they seem to be hopping from my comment to my comment.
Well, and that's why I said if anybody else wants to stop.
Yeah. No, Mr. Foley, it's fine.
We've asked questions.
So and we'll, so design standards, so we'll move down. The next item that was questioned was under E, playground and recreation areas. This says any development containing 40 or more units shall provide an outdoor play area or common space for use for families with children. So it's recreation areas as well as areas for children. Obviously, if it was a project without children, it would, Fuller Village or something else that would have an open space, a recreation space. And I don't know if Cheryl, if you want to
I don't
add.
know, maybe if an 80-year-old person might want to swing.
Sure. A
Bring
recreation
their grandchildren
area.
there.
A recreation, a play
The
area.
liability.
A garden for people.
A garden, yeah. I mean, Fuller Village has a tennis court area that was designed into that project, and other amenities, outdoor amenities.
What was the issue with this? Did we have an issue?
It says any development, containing.
What if it's
40 more
age-restricted
parking-
senior
It's
housing?
age-restricted.
They can just propose community garden or some other active outdoor space.
The grandchildren might come. They might want to swing.
All right, so going down to I, landscape at parking interior. And this said a minimum of a 5-foot wide landscape divider shall be provided between every 10 parking spaces, and a shade tree shall be planted between every 20 parking spaces. This is something we've been doing more often to try to break up the concrete, create more shade. Parking lots tend to be just heat, attractors, so giving some sort of landscape buffer allows for it not to be such a hot, you'll see a lot of things in here, because part of what we do is we consider climate resiliency and things that we can do to encourage that. We've been trying to do more implementing of that. So
That's on new construction, right?
on new construction, yes.
Right.
So, and you'll see it like a great example of how it was done properly was the library. When the library was put in, it's beautifully landscape incorporating, so you're not just looking at a solid, flat, black asphalt surface. It has really nice trees and ornamentals and shade. So we're trying to do more of that, but somebody who has an already existing parking lot, it's only new construction.
Now, I don't think the library goes to this extent. Like, there are more than 10 spaces on the library in a row, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And again,
which is fine. I'm just
right.
trying to understand.
We're trying to break it, just breaking it up more. We didn't weigh in on the library, so that.
Okay, I'm just.
It was a nice with a middle buffer, but
Yes.
you'll see some,
They're trying to help reduce greenhouse gases down in Milton. Our greenhouse gases are up since our last, so we need trees, we're removing too many trees. So having more trees where our cars are parked will help with that.
So taking the trees down on Bassett is a good idea. That's what you're saying? You're gonna replace them? Just asking for a friend. I'm just asking.
jumping down to we were at I, sorry, J. The last sentence, the buffer may include a fence or wall of no more than 3 feet in height unless there is a significant grade change between the parking and the sidewalk. This is to have, we want, a nice landscaping to separate through from the sidewalk. But what we don't want is when you drive down a road and you're just looking at a solid fencing and people are putting up these big stockade fences, it's really unattractive, and especially when you see, I'm sorry for anyone who has it, but a plastic shiny fence, on a, I know,
We
but
should we should really outlaw vinyl.
Love a
plastic.
vinyl
I know.
fence, Meredith.
So we're trying to do more natural.
Well,
Because
that's
they're
probably not
They're
sustainable.
not sustainable.
But and keeping it low,
So,
it's
yes,
it's
I think
more of
that's
so
good.
you can
Shoot
see,
to, wood, natural.
so you can see, and you can see the landscaping. You can see when a project, you can see the beauty of the building or the site without having just a big wall of,
Plastic.
or yes, whatever. Okay, sorry. So that's why there was a height in there. Again, these are things if we need a waiver, but. Under ground cover plantings are preferable to mulch where practical. Large areas of lawn are not desirable. This was something actually we just implemented at the Gardner School, and they had a big lawn area in the front where we said, this is more of a natural setting, rather than having something where you have to fertilize, have to mow, maintain. What about doing something? Irrigate, all the things that sort of trigger in a big lawn areas, making it more of a natural field. It was actually, I think there's wildflowers in it, but it's more something with native plantings we encourage in a site plan rather than having things that are invasives, but having it just be more of a natural, which is just
Like
better.
Wolcott Woods, actually.
Yeah, keeping a field, which is just more sustainable practice, and it fits into sort of the natural character of that site. So that would be when that is used. Outdoor lighting, light levels shall not exceed minimum design guidelines. Did you mean maximum on that, or did you mean
No, minimum.
Okay, if you wanted to explain that, I just want to make sure.
And I get Jay's point here, but we don't want light pollution, and we want the lighting to be adequate, but really just adequate. So this gives a standard for that, because what might seem adequate to one person could be subjective. So having this be tied to a standard is why this is here.
Yeah, thanks. If I could, again, as an applicant reading this, shall not exceed the minimum. I mean, I'd have to research what these guidelines are, but, so it has to be exactly at the minimum, no more, no less? I mean, if the answer is yes, that's fine, but if not, it's confusing.
We try to keep it at a minimum level, but typically we also refer to it as dark sky compliant. We might ask for things to be on timers sometimes, like for the Winter Valley, we have looked at that site, and when there's 30 new affordable units, we were concerned that there's going to be light spillage onto the abutting neighbors in the Indian Cliff neighbors that are going to be, or the abutting roads that might spill over. So we ask that those, sometimes we'll say the back lighting, when not being used, are on a timer.
And even on smaller projects, so even I know at my business, it's kind of common now, even if you get a light fixture at Lowe's, it actually has your photometric plan right in it. It's very common, and they all actually come with shields now. I don't think it's much of an expense as you might think it would be.
And it is clearly defined in the engineer, if somebody were to look it up. And most architects are familiar with this.
Yeah, I think, again, just for context, this applies probably to the larger projects that we review that have parking lots, like the memory care facility, where, they can come in with a design that has let's say a 20-foot pole, and they might only need 4 fixtures, but we say 20 feet, that's going to be highly visible, and it might cast beyond where we want. So why don't you switch to a 10 or 12-foot pole, and you might have to increase the number of fixtures you have. These are the kinds of conversations that we have, so at least this sets the framework for the kind of conversation we're going to have at the hearing.
Q, mechanical equipment. You said, does this mean HVAC? That's exactly what this would, a generator or something that would be ground level, that would refer to. And then jumping down to utilities, you said to the extent allowed by utility companies, we had locate utility meters to minimize their visibility. We don't have a choice if a utility company dictates where something has to be. But this just says, sometimes if you have the opportunity, put it behind that tree or put somehow put it in a way that minimize their visibility, integrate them into the building and site design. So there would be worked into that. V, a renewable energy project shall consider access to solar in building placement, orientation, and design. Your comment was, could we add shade trees near a building which would prevent solar energy should not necessarily be removed? And I completely agree with that statement. I think that's something that we talk about all the time. So that would be absolutely part of it. But we just, like, if people could consider if it's possible, but not to require to cut down trees to do it. Stormwater management.
This didn't have a verb.
Yeah.
Sorry, another grammar thing.
The application should include strategies. I think I agreed with that too. Is that or?
It should or shall? I think shall.
Shall is typically could to be consistent with.
So shall is the, okay.
General down to H. On B, entries shall be clearly defined and linked to a paved pedestrian network that include a public sidewalk. Again, I would just use 111 Highland Street as the example when that would be required. Moving down to G, infill lots. This was just a question of what an infill lot is. This is something that we run into occasionally with a lot of cut and fill, and if you would like, yeah, I was gonna.
Well, the infill lots also could be in the business districts where the buildings are party wall to party wall, and then you might have something that was torn down. Let's say, for example, if you think at Milton Village, where the Citizens kiosk is, that's sort of an infill site because you've got buildings that have a same kind of rhythm. All of a sudden, you've got that kiosk and parking around it. It's kind of a missing tooth, if you will. So that's, whether that needs a different kind of definition than that, but that's what generally is understood as an infill lot.
H, parking shall be subordinate in design and location to the principal building facade. Surface parking shall be located to the rear of the principal building. Rear side of the principal building, and you were just wondering why that was in there. We tend to just consistently ask for that because it's aesthetically better that we're not looking at just a parking lot. We try to make that the building or property as attractive. Obviously.
However, we understand when that doesn't happen, and we don't force them, and then it's approved by the board.
Yeah. There are times, that it just doesn't work for the site, or there's not space that it has to be there. So, like I think, again, the old Husa Club, the Goddard School, it ended up being in the front. There was not just where the building and the playground was going to be in the back.
And if it's closer to a neighborhood.
Yeah. We try to keep it off.
Again, if you're thinking of the business district, you don't want it to look like like Route 1 type of commercial development, the idea is you have a, streetscape with storefronts, et cetera. So some of these standards, you kind of have to, they may have been written with certain kinds of ideas in mind of what type of project it would be, and they may not apply to all applications, and so that's where it would get waived.
Okay, so buildings greater than 40 feet in length measured horizontally shall incorporate wall, plane, recesses, or projections having depth not less than 4 feet and extending, that basically is on all sides. You said, is it just the front? You were assuming, is that just the front of a building that you would want, not to have just a big flat wall, which is exactly why we don't. But there are times when it's visible from different sides, so it would depend on how many different sides you're exposed to. If it was on Adams Street in East Milton, you'd only be only seeing the front. That's where we would,
But if you think about like the ice house,
Yes.
and it has a facade, a long facade next to a single family, that this is where something like this would come in.
or the back. It could be that you have some circulation where you're seeing all sides of the property, so you would want windows to be consistent on all sides of the property. You would want for it to have the same look to all different sides. So that's where that came from. Jumping.
And I just want to add on something where it's as of right, like site plan approval. We've been advised that you need to be objective and not subjective. So rather than say at reasonable dimension or at reasonable distances, you have to give something. So that's why it's so specific.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then moving down, you had asked to delete, you did not delete it. You were going to, then change of material shall accompany a change in form?
Yeah, I didn't know what reduced perceived bulk means. And, again, I was sort of thinking I'd throw this out to you and you'd agree or not. I was very confused by that phrase, so I thought let's just strike it, but it sounds like we're not making very many changes. I still don't know what it means, but I don't need to.
Which one,
The phrase to reduce perceived bulk.
Well, you could do volume or size to change the word bulk. Does that help understand what it
But is it
means?
saying it shouldn't be used to reduce perceived bulk?
Right.
Or are you saying you shouldn't use it because we want to reduce perceived bulk? And then when I got to that point, I just gave up and said, can we strike it? But
Well, you'll see buildings, large buildings, where people change material without a change of plane. And the idea about that is to kind of break the scale some, but it's ineffective. And so we basically want to say that that's not acceptable. And so the change of plane and the change of materials can happen together, but don't just change the material.
So I think this section is sort of, there's reasons why they're all in there. I mean, I don't know if we want to go in. There's anything that's, there's reasons.
I mean, the next one I flagged was the windows have to be taller than they are wide. I mean, restaurants have windows that are wider than they are tall, don't they?
So that is typical of, we ask for first floor retail, that is larger windows or display windows. But when you look at the upper levels, or again, I'm going to use the Gardner School or the other schools, typically we say first floor, we want to be consistent, and you're wanting the architecture to fit in with the town of Milton. So you don't want big just squares all over a building. But of course, a first floor retail, that is consistent with display windows, and that we actually ask for more glass in those areas, that's more transparency, that's where that language came from, than solids, but in commercial buildings. But that's where the memory care project, a lot of the schools that we do, a lot of the buildings, we ask that that's sort of the dimensional. And again, if it's a different type of architecture, we look at that.
Okay. If I can skip to the next one. The next one I am more serious about than a lot of my other comments. You say garage entrances and services and loading areas shall not face a street directly. it would seem to me that it's a lot safer if a loading area is facing a street, the truck can just pull in. If the loading area is not facing the street, there's a lot more turning and a lot more, it seems a lot less safe. And that's, as I said, this is something I feel more strongly about than some of my other comments. Am I totally off base?
Well, again, we're looking at thinking about the business districts with something like this. And so if you can not have it be your pedestrian zone, it's better. So if you think about some places that you've been where you walk by a surface zone and you smell the garbage, I mean, this says unless no other location is feasible, of course, it has to be safe. I mean, that's part of the requirement. But this really has to do with the aesthetic. So if you have an option, we'd rather have the aesthetic, be onto the side or the back.
Yeah, but the aesthetics seems to go against I'd rather have a big truck back straight in, unload there, whatever, and pull straight out rather than pull in and turn. I'm getting out.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the application, honestly. So it's one of those things where we set out what we'd like to see, and then it gets discussed.
Okay.
These are all about sort of setting out our things to talk about. First of all, these are the things we're going to talk about. These are our preferences. And if you suggest to us that you can't do that or you want to do it differently, then that's what we talk about in our hearings.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, and I'll just use an example because we did Walcott Woods site plan approval. We were seeing a lot of condo projects coming in and applications where they were putting all the garage doors right in front. You drive by, and so basically you go around the circle and you see garage door, garage door, garage door, garage door, and you've seen those examples of bad design. So part of their thing was, can we have a design so you have your garage on the side, so you're looking at a beautiful front facade and not necessarily looking at a wall of garages as you pull through a development and seeing 20 units or 30 units at a time. So it just is a better aesthetic if you can do it that way.
It's how Union Point is in Weymouth. It's all garages.
It's all garages,
All
yeah.
garages for as far as you can.
Developers are getting away from the trend, but sometimes we'll just have to ask, and that's something that, if they see this in there, they'll be, oh, we'll design it that way, if it doesn't happen.
I mean, they're beautiful, but for, the way they have the garages, but it's just, I appreciate it.
Okay. I think roofing terraces, setback, that's normal.
yeah.
Okay, we'll skip that. So J, getting down to J, Cheyenne, that's B, retail, you wanted to add businesses shall have a majority of the facade made up of windows. You were just thinking of a different way.
I just thought it was hard to read.
Okay, have a greater proportion of transparency than solids, so see-through versus solids.
Yeah, this is just, again, kind of standard in other.
If that's standard language, that's okay. I found it hard to read,
Yes,
but
this
okay.
goes back to, we're very lucky to have Cheryl on the board, because as an architect, she deals with this language all the time, and she is familiar with it, so the town's very lucky to have her.
Thanks, Maggie.
So this is moving down to waivers, which explains a little bit more about how waivers can be applied.
She changed the word there, businesses.
Oh, sorry. We didn't want to change it, sorry.
Yeah.
I was reading from the red line version. Okay.
Meredith, before we move to waivers, I think
Yeah.
one of
Oh,
our
sorry.
members may have had a question. I'm sorry, I didn't see her.
So with regard to big letters F, I don't have the page numbers in front of me, I'm sorry. Oh, I think it might be on page 3. F, G, H, yeah. So big letters F, G, and H, so that goes from page 3 to
Review
7.
standards, site design standards.
And general building design
Yep.
standards. So I noticed a lot of those things really relate to, when we were talking about it just now, a lot of them really related to sort of commercial use, it seemed. And I'm just curious because when we talked about the site plan review, all the way at the top, it said the applicability includes ADUs. But then when I read these individual things, don't really seem, most of them, to apply to ADUs. So I was just curious about that. And also to Jay's point, again, I don't feel this way about this board, some board down the road, okay? Different people. I just would worry that these standards, like you have to have a garage that doesn't face the street. Well, now I have a garage as part of my, I don't know why I would house my car there in my tiny ADU, but I have my garage and it, you know, I'm limiting my ability to have it face the road, or I have to have a certain number of trees or whatever, solar panels and things. So I'm just curious about why we included ADUs here and didn't exempt them out of those FGI, whatever I said.
Because they also fall under the Dover Amendment. Again, these are things that are in here for any site plan review that would come before us, but it's going to be different for each site, and it's going to be what is possible on that to make it the best that it can be. And sometimes, you know, people come in and they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. Like, oh, you could do it this way. We did that with a Gardner school. They came in with a single-story building, and we said, you know what, could you reduce the size and the footprint and make it, and they made it a 2-story building, and it was much less impactful and less retaining walls, and they're like, oh, we could do it that way. So that's what this is about. So
Can I add on ADUs, you know, the final regulations just came out, and we were well into this when we received those, and we still don't have the model bylaw from the state. So I anticipate we're going to have to, we may have to modify things as we see what the state's model bylaw is. And we may, if we keep it in here, we may have to call out that these particular standards don't apply to ADUs, or don't apply in, or set out separate things that apply just to the ADUs.
Or
But-
subject to the limits
Yeah.
in the bylaws or something like that.
What we wanted to have is a consistent place for everything that requires site plan approval, so that's why we put it here. But we are sensitive that it's a scale that's different than everything else here, right? So a lot of these standards are really intended for a larger scale. And so if we have to come back and revise that in terms of the ADU, I think we've been waiting to see what these final documents from the state look like before, but we thought we should capture it now, and therefore, and be able to take it out even if we had to in May, at the May town meeting.
And again, we have to be able to defend any condition that we would be asking, that it would have to be appropriate and not excessive in any way, so. Okay, sorry, moving.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
So waivers, we were down to waivers, which is KL, waivers, HI,
If I can speak to this?
yeah.
When I read it, it looked like the board can only give a waiver at the pre-application. And I wanted to add something that says, oh, maybe you can also give a waiver later. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes,
I don't know if you agree with that,
Yeah.
but
no, and that is if after the application has been filed during the review process in public meeting or hearing, because sometimes things come up during public hearings, and the board determines the additional information is required, we would, you know, sometimes we would need more. I don't know that we would in the beginning say we needed a site plan, civil or some sort of plan that we wouldn't actually know in advance that we would need. So you're saying if they ask for a waiver, but I'm sure things do come up that, a matter of fact, I'm thinking of examples where we require a certain road width, and they might later come back and ask for a more narrow road width. I think we've addressed that before. I'm trying to think of things that, an example of waivers that are asked for after, you're saying, after the waiver period,
Well-
can they come back and ask for a waiver later?
I'm saying, the initial language makes it sound like you can only grant waivers at the pre-application conference. As my understanding, the pre-application conference is optional. It's recommended, but optional. So I wanted to add either that doesn't happen, or that does happen, but for whatever reason, they submit their application, they're missing something, they get rejected, and they come back to you and say, I applied, I got rejected. Maybe this would be a second pre-application conference.
It seems like the last sentence gives us the opportunity to,
Which last sentence?
The last paragraph in the section.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, the board, upon written request of the applicant, waive site and building design standards of this section.
That's actually
that's-
not the same as the submission standard.
that's
The
different.
submission requirements.
Oh, I'm sorry, where were you?
He's like the submission
Oh, okay.
requirements.
Yeah, if the submission says you have to include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they say, well, 4 doesn't apply to me. I just wanted to give you a little more flexibility to grant a waiver.
And I think there's a lot of flexibility in this document to grant waivers.
Yeah, I think we would,
My experience would be that the applicant would request as many waivers as possible at the beginning and not during, during the process, but,
I don't know, I think the final is, I mean, the wording, I understand Jay's point, but, I think that does give, I think it does, as Member Oldfield indicated, give flexibility to grant those waivers. I don't know if anyone else on the committee, do you have any?
I think
Liz?
that it gives you the authority to grant the waivers whenever you want to. However, I think that the language makes it so that the applicant has to make the request at the pre-application conference. I don't know that I care. I'm just saying that I think that you can grant the waiver whenever you want for any particular reason that you want. Well, you have to have written requests of them, but I think they have to make their requests at the pre-application conference.
and that would be because it wouldn't be deemed a complete application when they filed it. So that's the thing, they can't, we don't have to accept an application unless it's complete. And if we hadn't granted any waivers, then we would have an incomplete application.
Okay.
Well, no, you would state that those studies or whatever are waived. And I think at that point, it would be a complete application.
Right, it's just the timing of the request for the waiver, Jim, right?
No, I understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually leaning towards agreeing with Jay, to give another opportunity for waivers. I just don't like the wording of after the initial application is submitted and rejected. I mean, why do you have to quantify it like that? Board members grant such a waiver.
I don't think that's our language is rejected.
Oh, no, I know, I'm just thinking it through. It's all right. That's all right, you guys.
Right.
Well, again, town council reviewed this, right?
Well, I kind of come back to, again, what I just said, which is that the planning department would go back to the applicant and say, we can't start the application because you have not provided all the information, therefore a complete application. And if that's the case, they would say, I would like to request a waiver not to submit XYZ. Planning department would take it to the board would discuss it, and we could grant the waiver, and therefore it's deemed a complete application, and we could start the public hearing. So later for them to request it,
We don't usually see that. It's
I
because what
just
they're
can't
asking
understand the
for,
context for how it would come up.
what they're asking us to review, they usually have a full application by the time it comes to us.
Yeah, that's true.
I've never seen it come later.
I can imagine a situation in which somebody could say, here's my plan, I think it complies. You say, no, those trees aren't, sufficient enough or whatever, and then they say, well, here's the reason why I'd like you to waive the whole tree requirement or something. But I think that, I often think about the margin cases. And so I think here, what Cheryl's saying, what you're saying, Meredith, makes a lot of sense, that it would be on the front end. But I think you still have the authority as a board to make a waiver later, the way that it's written as part of that back and forth process that Maggie was talking about earlier, so.
But isn't the danger there that if we waive something on this project, but we don't waive it on the next project, we're gonna wind up in court? I mean, so I think basically, the way I would see it and understand it is that I waive up front, I present the application, it's rejected, and I talk to you about the one piece of it that is rejected, and I go back and then can request a waiver and refile? Is that how that would work?
So there are time restrictions for if you have a denial. So what you would be better off doing is asking to withdraw without prejudice so that you could come right back with some additional or different information.
And we do see that happen.
And we see that, yeah.
And if I can play devil's advocate a little bit to the response that I know town council has reviewed this wording, I guess my response would be, imagine someone on the floor of town meeting standing up and suggesting 1 or 2 or 10 of these changes that I'm suggesting now. That'll make for a long night. So.
Well, hopefully they'll watch this meeting and we have answered
Yeah.
questions.
I hope that they don't do that, because we have spent a lot of time and a lot of years, Cheryl more than anyone, and perhaps it's not perfect, but it's way better than what we have.
So I'm trying to bang at it and poke at every weak spot I
If anyone's
can.
listening, it's way better than what we have. And we've been working on this for months and months. And unfortunately, town council has had it for months. And it's unfortunate he did not release it sooner so everyone could see it. So I would hope, and that the Warrant Committee supports it, and I would hope if any town meeting member has a problem, they should get it straightened out before town meeting floor.
Yeah, I would just say too, we've had public hearing open for 2 or 3 meetings with no comments coming in on site plan approval, except perhaps one from former member O'Donnell, who had a couple of questions about some of it. And some of that may not be answered until the AG reviews it or HLC reviews it. And, like I mentioned with the ADUs, the regs have just been continuing to be updated. And so they have made a lot of, provisions in the regulations that establish what is protected, which means there's very few things that we can put in our zoning. So, and even on site plan review. But it does allow for site plan review. So if it allows for it, then what are you going to review? You have to have some opportunity to review if it's allowing for site plan approval. So I think it's one of these things where it's probably going to go back and forth a bit, and we'll probably have to revise it. And revising our zoning is, even when we've worked on it for a long time, is not unusual, right? So even after the AG reviews it, we may need to make some revisions to it. So.
Right, so I don't know if everyone knows, but every bylaw does go to the AG. She's got 90 days to review. She'll review to make sure it's not in conflict with state law, and then she sends the town a letter, and if there's anything in it that she is concerned with, so then we have an opportunity to fix it.
So let's just, we're almost to the home stretch here. If we can go down to.
Can I real quick ask, the next sentence that says, if after the application has been filed, I didn't know why that sentence was in a section titled waivers. Does it have anything to do with waivers?
Well, I think this is where the board's reserving its right to, if it had waived something, but during the
Okay.
course of the hearing, it finds that it actually could benefit from something that we can still request it.
So I suggested maybe adding, if you need information, additional information which was previously waived. Because otherwise, it's just sort of open-ended, saying the board can ask for anything, which maybe the board can ask for anything. But then why is it a section called waivers?
It can be very difficult also to predict everything that we might like to see in an application. So this does preserve a right to ask for something that's not in the list.
Okay.
And I think, I know it makes it look like it's burdensome, but who would have predicted like an exterior stair at a Milton Marketplace is something that we're looking at. So it's just hard for us to predict everything, anticipate everything. So it gives us an opportunity.
Wood stair, aren't they? They're wood as well, aren't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just,
Yeah, with the vinyl.
so, a lot of this is based on other things that we've reviewed, but we would like to reserve that opportunity.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So this getting down here, Jay, I think this is where you had we had some things that were filled in that you, for some reason, didn't have in your draft.
Okay.
So, Cheyenne, if you can just scroll down under M, authority of the board, that was fine, but when we get down to N, timeline, this is the timeline here. Authority of the board, that was, down to N? Yeah. So this is, that's,
Ours is blank.
that's strange, because it was on what?
And do you have what was just sent by Cheyenne based on our last meeting?
That's what this is. This was,
But they should have that too.
I don't know, but that's what
Does
was.
yours have the same file name as this?
And
N?
if you're looking at the last sheet, it says N timeline and then it says O site plan approval. Those actually just got broken up. So what it says for O is N. So what I have on screen is the latest version. Yeah, so like in formatting, when
Yeah,
it
well,
took
now it makes
from
sense.
OneDrive to,
Oh, yeah.
NGBO.
Yeah, that's what it is. So
That makes more sense.
That
I didn't do the other side of the quiz.
I wanted to go through this with you.
Sorry, teacher.
So timeline, why don't I'll read through these, and you can see. No later than 30 days, you wanted to add after.
The submission.
After.
It's a typo.
So that is a typo. We can change that. After the submission, yep, of a complete application. And should be completed expeditiously in general site plan review. Okay. So we good on that. O, the decision was your P. So you have this language, but it was just the P. Project phasing, this was fine. This is, now it's, to be consistent, it's P. Appeal is Q. R is severability. So, and there were no issues on that. That was just the it was just the lettering. So I just wanted to make sure that you all saw that. And that is our article on site plan review.
Yeah, excellent.
Now, it's 9:10. Do you want to power through ADU at this point and try to get through these, or do you want to?
We have to vote 3 changes.
Should we do, yeah, should we vote? It's up to you, Chair, because.
Yeah, I defer.
I mean, they're going to still discuss, but we can vote whether.
You can
whether
vote-
we
We can
accept these
accept.
changes, right?
Yeah, and then we'll take it as
Perfect,
Cheryl said, as a
okay.
whole.
That's good. I just want to make sure we weren't getting ahead of you. All right, so if you'd like to make a,
So can we just show those, Cheyenne? We've lost it? No.
so this was town council's language, notwithstanding any zoning, yep, to the contrary. All right, and we can scroll down. adding
17, yeah.
17, changing chapter 260 from 15.
Section. Chapter 260.
Chapter 260.
15 to chapter 260.
I know, but, okay. I just didn't know if it was supposed to be section.
Yeah,
And it says chapter, and then, but other things are referred.
We'll double check that with.
you have it
I don't
printed
have
out?
my computer in front of me.
What section? I can look it up.
Yeah, I should
Just
know.
go to the general bylaws of the town,
Bylaws, was it wastewater?
wetlands.
So it says,
Is it section or chapter?
Oh, yeah, it says chapter 260
but
there.
over here it says section.
Oh, no.
Can we do both?
And jumping?
Chapter.
Let's put
Let's do
chapter and we'll
section.
just verify it with town council.
Yeah.
I think it would be a chapter. I think section is a mistake.
Okay, so we'll,
I say chapter.
okay.
Yeah.
And
Your
it had been
attorney's,
chapter before too,
Yes.
so chapter 15.
Chapter 260, just the number then that changed, and then the application.
And this was the application shall include?
And then there was the type,
Yeah.
typo one.
I guess the typo at the bottom, 17.
That was in the town one?
It was,
After.
under,
Yeah. Is that right, Jay?
I wasn't paying attention.
Under
Timeline.
under N
no later than 30 days after. They want it to be
After.
Okay, and beginning.
of, correct.
So motion to
So-
accept,
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to accept the changes as proposed in the document on the screen this evening.
Second.
okay, roll call, Jim,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes?
Maggie,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great, so.
Can I ask an open-ended question? Or, sorry, a high-level question. So I think there's a lot of improvements here, but as we discussed earlier, there's also, you're adding things you're reviewing, for example, the restaurants. Would you, and this is a trick question, would you still think it was an improvement and better if we made all these changes but didn't say we're gonna cover the restaurants?
I think that's an important part of our changes. It's, all of this is, we've sort of, this is a cleanup of everything that we've had to deal with, that are issues, and putting it in writing.
Okay.
So it just is making everything more clear for an applicant. And
Right, I would agree with Meredith. We've applied lessons learned from applications over time to this, which I mentioned earlier that I've been wanting to do this. The restaurants are kind of a late addition to this, but an important one. And I think and any application that I have reviewed in East Milton Square, neighbors are just concerned about all of them. And it's just better for all involved, neighbors, applicants, and review bodies, to be clear and to give the right tools. And so it will make it easier. Planning board's had to go through some difficult applications because things haven't been clear. And I think this would be much better.
I mean, you're talking about the clarity, which I love. That's the majority of the document. I love the clarity. But there's also the expansion of what you cover in site plan review. You previously didn't cover restaurants that only made an internal change, and now you are. So those are sort of two components of this. And
So
one
Jay,
possibility might be to do the other component, but not.
So one thing I'll say is, I'm going to use a particular example of the Milton Marketplace, where there was a restaurant that had hours from 8 to 2, 5 days a week. And then a new application, which is increasing seating in the same square footage and increasing hours from 7 a.m. until midnight, some days out of the week, and operation 7 days a week. and the kinds of service that requires in terms of deliveries, trash pickup, odors from a kitchen, noise, those are all the things that we review in a site plan application. It was, if they had not put in that exterior stair, it really wouldn't have triggered a review. And we actually, they didn't think they really needed a review because it wasn't all that clear. And we said, we think you need a review. And so, whether by cooperation, they came to us, but it would have been much cleaner and clearer. And, those impacts for the neighbors, we heard from a lot of neighbors who are right next to that property who were concerned about noise, who were concerned about odors, who were concerned about deliveries and so forth. And we've talked through all of those, and it's, they have to go back to the Board of Appeal. It's a complicated type of permitting there with a pre-existing non-conforming use. But in any case, it would have just been, at least it sets the expectation the next time that there might be something like that, because the impacts are different when you're extending the hours and you're extending the type of business.
And also, when you know better, you do better. We know more, and we now when we're doing better with what we know.
And overall, it will just be more helpful to everybody is the goal. So that this will be.
Okay. I'd like to move on to ADU,
Yes.
and I
Okay.
think it would be good
This
to
is
get
shorter,
going on
so,
that.
but that's why I was just going to say, do we want to try, let's try to get through this. This would be great. Okay. So Cheyenne, if you could also pull up our original draft of the ADU to make sure we have all the full language. Great. And I'll just, while she's pulling that up, just to read for the public who might not know, the purpose and intent of the ADU, the intent of permitting accessory dwelling unit is to increase the range of housing choices, add dwelling units to meet the needs of smaller households, and to make dwelling units available to moderate income households who might otherwise have difficulty finding housing, allow dwelling units on single-family residential properties or in a single-family district that are appropriate for households at a variety of stages of life, encourage more economic and energy-efficient use of the town's housing supply while maintaining the appearance and character of the town's single-family neighborhoods, encourage the reuse of existing accessory structures which may have historical or cultural significance or the preservation of which would generally contribute aesthetic value to the landscape, neighborhood, or town, and provide an opportunity for homeowners who can no longer physically or financially maintain their single-family home to remain in homes they might otherwise be forced to leave. Then it goes into a definition section, which, Jay, I know you had a lot of comments on and wanted to take out quite a few of the comments. We'll go through those because there's reasons why they're in there. We basically took all of these from the HLC's regulations. These were essentially just cut and paste lifted because we thought it would be good to have them in. Some of them I know you may not need, but there's reasons why a lot of them are in there. So accessory dwelling unit, this is the definition of an ADU, a self-contained housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, sanitary facilities on the same lot as a principal dwelling, subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements. And then we have A, B, C, and those there were no comments on. When we get down to, and again, that was taken right from HLC. Building code, the Mass State Building Code, just for reference sake, if anybody needs that. Bus station, the reason why bus station is in here is because I think you had wanted to take it out. This is a requirement, this is referenced in what we are allowed to require for parking. So typically, we are allowed one parking place, that we are required to, we are able to require one parking spot per ADU on a lot. A homeowner, just to be clear, can provide as much parking as they want. We're not asking them, but we're limited unless it's within a half mile of a bus station, which they define more as bus stops or trolley. And so that's why the bus station is in there, because if it's within a half mile, we cannot require that there be a parking spot with that ADU required. So we'll get to that later, but
Yeah, I think it's just, we're going to need to capitalize it later under the parking requirement section.
great. Bus station, commuter rail station, these are all design standards, dwelling unit. These were all, there is a typo under dwelling unit. Let me see, where was that? I think it was an and. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, you know what? That's under gross floor area. We haven't gotten there. Never mind. So EOHLC, fire code, gross floor area. You had in that under walls separating buildings or dwelling units, that you wanted to see the dwelling and the unit capitalized. That was,
This definition comes right from the regs. so-
yeah, this is right.
That's what I was.
Yeah, so I don't think, so, yeah, we're not gonna change it, we're gonna just keep it Cheyenne, because it's directly from the regulations, the way it's written in theirs. But there is, at the last sentence, a protected use size of, oh, you had. Shall be used,
And then it's ADU.
sorry. Oh, that was just how you had changed the, I think.
Let's say GFA, not GFS.
Where there are multiple,
Good call.
GFS of the largest
Principal dwelling units on the
dwelling.
lot.
It's GFA in the regulations. And I think it's gross floor area.
Correct, that
Yeah,
should be.
thing.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Yes, it should say GFA, not
Right.
GFS. And I noted, and I don't know that we care, but I noted there was one other change that I, they are,
Before you go there, Liz,
Yeah.
I think the point about protected use words, I think those should be struck also. I think that was a correct flag, because it's not a definition, and
it's a, yeah, of an ADU, and that's what
I'm
Jay
sorry,
had.
it's
Yeah, I
an
wouldn't-
ADU.
it's in that definition of gross floor area, there you go.
Yeah.
I just, note that under dwelling unit, you added, this definition does not include a mobile home trailer, however mounted, from the regulation. Which I don't have a problem with, I'm just pointing out that was a little bit.
That was additional language that we added, yeah.
Yeah.
But which we are allowed to do.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I was just saying that that's an addition. for the
So let's just,
follow
so we changed, Cheyenne, can you highlight the GFA? And do we need to highlight that as just, so when we go to
Probably
vote?
be tracking the changes.
Yeah, track the, yeah, GFA, and then we took out protected use, so an ADU would be, or actually, we should use our original language, right?
We should remove the protected use, but I think maybe if you just undo those changes, Cheyenne, and then put track changes on.
Great. We
Did
need
it
to
show
put-
up?
Yep, it did, oh, protected
Okay.
use, you said delete that, okay.
Okay, got it. That's right, okay.
Perfect, thank you, Cheyenne, you're much better at this than any of us could be, so thank you. So next on here is historic district. The reason why this is one of the definitions also from the regs, but we put this in because we may be looking down the road, a future local historic district, we wouldn't have to come back and amend the article. It would already, this language would already be there. Lot, that's, that was fine. There were no issues on that, so we can scroll down. Modular dwelling, again, these are principal dwelling. These are all definitions. Station, zoning station.
So principal dwelling also says protected use ADU, and we want to get rid of the protected use, I believe.
I think that's right.
Okay. Great, thank you. Short-term rentals, temporary dwelling. I think all the definition, the rest of the definitions were fine. There weren't any typos there. Then C, general conditions and requirements for an accessory dwelling unit. One, the last sentence, going down, yeah, on the last sentence, by special permit, variance, waiver, or other zoning relief, or discretionary zoning approval. I think your question was, where would that be? Where would an example be of a single family?
Yeah, where would it be? Or it was sort
It's
of,
not a single family district, like, so we do have pre-existing non-conforming structure, single family homes in business districts.
And we actually allow them.
okay.
They're allowed, yeah.
So this is us being a little bit more generous, because as I read at least the legislation, not the regulations, it only needs to be allowed in single-family zoning districts. So are we being a little more generous here?
No,
No?
this is required. Wherever you allow a single-family dwelling, you have to allow an ADU.
Okay, thank you.
You couldn't build a new single-family home in the business district. It's an already existing
Uh,
single or two-family.
I might beg to differ. I think we do
With
allow.
special permit?
We do allow single families in the business districts. It's something that I think should be looked at, but I'm pretty sure
The
it's in there.
underlying
Yeah.
is still residential. Okay, that's good clarification. So yeah, we would allow it, to answer your question. Under there shall be no more than one, and you wanted to capitalize ADU. I don't have a problem with that.
Can I say something funny about this? When we use ADU and then accessory dwelling unit, should we use it just ADU at the top and just call it, accessory
ADU.
dwelling unit and just go ADU throughout the whole document?
Yes, I think so.
Maybe we can do that at the very end with Cheyenne,
That would be a
just to make it for consistency purposes.
I was,
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
no, because I had actually,
I just-
when we were drafting this, thinking that this bothers me.
And Jay makes a comment and that's how I caught it. So
Right. ADUs shall not be eligible for zoning variance, zoning dimensional variances, proposed to increase the number of allowable ADUs on a lot. In our new, with the new ADU regulations, we can limit one ADU per lot. A town could, if they want, allow more than one ADU, which would trigger going through the zoning board of appeals. But just because we're starting off with this, we thought, we don't know what kind of impact this is going to be to our building department. We don't know how many are going to come online at once. So we thought we'll start with a limit of one ADU per lot. But our understanding is that if it's a two-family, an ADU can be put into one of the units.
Okay.
That's
Just when I read the
coming from
legislation,
the state.
and I haven't really read all the reg or the model, but when I read the legislation, it says, for more than one ADU or rental thereof in a single-family district, there shall be a special permit for the use of land or structures I don't know, I'm confused, I'm honestly confused, but town council, I don't want it to be bounced back by the AG.
Yeah,
If town council's okay with it, I guess I am.
that's, sorry.
No, it's the webinar that was put on by HLC indicated that towns don't have to allow for more than one, but the regs could be different from the time that they were at that webinar. So it is good to get clarification.
Thank you.
I agree, yeah, we'll definitely make sure. Okay. So I think that was it. Then we jumped down to 4, a detached unit. And you were wanting to put those in a lower case?
Yeah, it's not a defined term.
Okay. Shall meet the dimensional requirements. And you were just asking, what are dimensional requirements? So that would be height of a building, side setbacks, what would be others? When you're looking at single-family residential zoning, it would just be consistent, but it's measurable. They're measurable things that would be included.
And every district can be different.
Right. There'll be different setbacks for different zones.
Thank you.
So that was that. Then 6, this goes down to gross floor area of an ADU. The last sentence, you asked to capitalize accessory dwelling unit.
But we're going to change those.
That should just be ADU.
Yeah, ADU. Those are all going to become ADU. Okay. Number 7, an ADU may be rented for periods may not be rented for periods less than 12 months at a time and is prohibited from being rented on a weekly or daily basis. The ADU shall not be used for boarding and lodging or other commercial use. So the 12-month was consistent with what most leases are in Milton. If you look on any properties being leased, typically it's a 12-month lease. Occasionally there'll be a shorter term, but that would not be standard. The boarding and lodging, those are simply VRBOs. It's a hotel, referring like a hotel stay. So
Yeah.
they're called all different types of things now. Airbnb, some people refer to. We don't allow any of that, a vacation.
I guess my 2 issues, 12 months, I believe it's standard, but if we're forbidding it, could it be like 6 months? Wouldn't that accomplish the same goal of, it's not a month to month? But if you have a visiting professor from out of the country who wants a 6-month rent, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. It's just, we're forbidding this. And the boarding and lodging, I think I know what you mean, but then again, I board and lodge myself and my family in my own house. So I didn't know if these were well-defined terms in the law.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of you're related to your wife and your children. It's when there's, I think, 3 or more people living in a house that aren't related, it triggers a boarding house
Okay.
classification.
I just wanted to be sure that was clear. And the 12-month, no, we're not interested in any wiggle room there?
Well, I mean, if you want to argue for 6, why not argue for 3? I live across from Milton Academy and there's a teacher that wants to teach 1 class. Like I feel strongly about stopping transient housing in the town. And I think 12 months is a good number.
Yeah, we sort of landed on 12 just for and that's something we
I
could,
like 12.
we could always amend it if we found it was problematic, but later time.
I think Julia has a question.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just,
Thank you, Karen.
I had some similar thoughts to Jay. I wasn't entirely clear on that boarding line either, exactly what that meant. And then I also had the same thought around 12 months. As someone who has both been a renter and has rented property I owned before, there are so many situations where, only having that minimum 12-month option is not ideal. And I understand we don't just want, transient housing, but when we think about helping seniors stay in this community, what if they are, building ADUs to have that extra source of income, and we're making it really challenging for them to find renters because of that 12-month limit. So I'm with Jay that I would be in favor of considering something, 6, 8, 9 months that allows a little more wiggle room than the 12, because there are a lot of situations where professors are coming into town for a semester and just need a 6-month lease. And I think that could be a really good option for the ADU setup.
I also wonder if Milton Hospital is taking advantage of visiting nurses that go for 3-month periods. So I think that 12-month is something that should be thought through a little bit more.
So I think if you're an older person and you're renting out an ADU to help with your income, I think managing somebody, a renter, 2 renters as opposed to 1 renter in a year becomes challenging for an older person. Older residents don't tend to be landlords. I'm thinking about my mother-in-law, for instance, and I think it would be better for her just to deal with 1 renter than 2.
Well, I mean, that's their call. We can't, decide what's best for all of the seniors.
One thing that I find just in my real estate experience is people want more than 1 year because they want to lock in their rent. Rents have been going up so high, so fast. I actually have people who, often the landlord's having to lessen the lease term or wanting not to commit to anything more than a year, but often renters are wanting to lock in and they want a longer rental period. I've had my own listings that are short term, and a landlord who didn't want, and it was really hard to actually rent that unit for a 6-month. One landlord didn't want to rent.
I don't doubt all that, but we're forbidding something here. Should we forbid it?
It's worth discussion. Yeah, it was sort of where our board landed, but certainly you could make a recommendation if the warrant committee wanted to make a recommendation on that. But that's just the language that we felt most comfortable with, just coming in, and this is all very new. So I think the next item, you would delete 8. There was a...
Oh, and versus and, just a typo.
And, do you see that and in ADU instead of and? That was the only thing on that. Down to design standards.
Can we, on number 9, bus station, commuter rail station could be capitalized to match the definitions.
Yeah.
Trolley stop is a planning board terminology doesn't exist in the regs.
Okay. Thank you. We had talked about that. Yeah. So the next, design standards. 1, exterior modification to a principal dwelling or accessory structure, as well as the construction of a new detached unit, shall be architecturally compatible with the dwelling unit, including use of complementary color, So you were asking...
So detached unit shouldn't be capitalized since it's not in the definitions.
Right, so detached unit, we would lowercase that. And again, this is consistent with language. We looked at a lot of other ADUs in other towns as well. Obviously, if you're saying if there's a more contemporary home with a historic barn structure, we obviously would not require, but this is, well, what this is related to, I'm sorry, exterior modifications, when you're changing the exterior of a building. I don't know that somebody would be changing the exterior of a barn or structure if they wanted to keep that historic structure look. So,
I don't know what an exterior modification is. It could be very,
Liz?
I had a question about all of the design standards, so all of section D. In the regulations, it says prohibited, unreasonable regulations include design standards that would not be applied to a single-family residential dwelling in a single-family residential zoning district in which the protected ADU use is located. Are these all things that would apply to single-family residential houses as well? Do we have
the
that?
difference is you can, so we have site plan approval because an ADU falls under the Dover Amendment, which does, anything under a Dover Amendment does allow site plan review. So these were things that typically would be looked at, and I think we put them in here. They're consistent with what you see with other ADUs in other towns.
No, I don't doubt that. I'm just confused because the regulations say that for the design standards specifically, you can't have ones that aren't applied to single-family residential dwellings in the single-family residential zoning district in which that ADU is located. So I'm just wondering, these requirements that are in our design standards, are those requirements that apply to single-family homes as well in Milton?
So the interesting thing is that you don't, when you have an ADU, it's a second unit, and so having an exterior stair is not necessarily something that's contemplated with a single family. So it's addressing something that's unique about an ADU.
I was looking more at the first one, Cheryl.
Yeah, I'll come back to that
thank
one.
you.
And then the separate entrance as well. And having a pedestrian access to the second unit is important. That those are not contemplated if you only have one unit, right? Then, yeah, the first one is a question, right? Because, but what we're saying here is that it has to be compatible because you're adding the second unit. And there isn't such a restriction on a single family because you're not necessarily adding another unit. So I understand what the regs say, and I think this is really a question what HLC is going to say about this.
And the AG.
But also they allow for, it allows for site plan approval for EDUs.
Within reason, yeah.
Yeah, within reason, so,
Most communities don't have design standards for single-family homes unless it's in a local historic district. So I don't know how other communities are handling this, and we'll see whether this will be acceptable or not, and whether, I personally think that we should see what the model bylaw looks like, and I was thinking it was going to come out today, and they said it was coming out, I think, today, but if we get it before town meeting, I think that could help guide us quite a bit.
It's only 9:45. Still coming. Hold out hope.
It's still coming. Okay.
I would still say on number one, it might, given how this town likes its historic structures, it might be good to put some words in there. Again, if you think I'm being annoying about this, imagine someone on the floor of town meeting raising this point.
No,
So-
that's why we're going through everything now
So
here, yes.
I don't have suggested wording. I'm sorry.
What was the suggested wording for this?
I don't have suggested
Oh,
wording.
okay, I'm
Just
sorry.
Well, you could
something
take
that
the
is-
shall, we could change if we wanted to, because right now it says a protected, as well as construction of a new detached unit shall be architecturally compatible with the principal dwelling. You can,
Make it-
you know what, why don't we review that with
yeah, but
maybe,
would we really want something that's not compatible, though?
Well, again,
know,
if it's a historic barn in a modern house, do you want to make the barn no longer look historic? That was my concern. That's
Right,
You lost me. There's a historic barn behind a modern house.
like if there's a historic barn and the house is not historic, it's modern looking. And then they want to modify their barn to be an ADU and they do, they touch the exterior. They shouldn't have to make the barn, they should be able to have the barn still look historic or the outbuilding or whatever it is.
Yeah, I guess they should.
So something, if it's historic looking, something, you don't have to change it.
why don't I run this by town council and ask if appropriate, or if, some language that gives an option for a waiver on that. But unless,
You could change shall to should, and that would,
And I'm not saying y'all would shoot this down.
No,
I'm saying the applicant will read the rules and will think, well, I guess I got to do
no,
it.
that's,
Well, you're not looking at me, so I'm just gonna start talking. Okay. In any situation in which, if there is like an existing garage or an existing building that they're then converting into an ADU, those buildings would exist. And so people are accustomed to whatever it looks like already. And so if you're not really touching the exterior so much, maybe a little bit, to have to then redesign it to go along with the main principal house.
so what we could do is similar language as number 2. Instead of shall, say is encouraged to be architecturally compatible.
There you go.
Then you're not mandating it, but you're,
I think that would hold up better.
Almost like, I never know that expression, but there's something non-conforming. It's like already.
Pre-existing non-conforming.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's kind of what this is, right? Because that's.
so it shall be architecturally compatible with the principal dwelling.
so what this is trying to get at is having something that's an ADU that looks like it belongs there and not done as inexpensively as possible, like a box that's just brought in and dropped in.
Yep.
So it's trying to do it within the parameters that the state's setting, which is pretty difficult, but I do think we could say is encouraged rather than shall, if we want to
Allow the,
sort of pass muster with what the regs say, but I don't know.
Up to you, but I just think it's more likely to be held up and you still have that language and people still see that and then they will do it and know what to expect. But I think.
Do we
my
think
personal opinion-
there's any historic barns with a contemporary house in town?
Yes,
If that's our concern.
I do. I do.
I just know people like their historic things, and people will freak out if you don't make an exception for historic
I
things.
do.
Whether it's real or not, the freak out on town meeting floor will be real.
new detached unit
Well, this
is encouraged to be.
That's where, if you take shall out, because shall has a very specific meaning, and should or is encouraged to be,
So let's-
that
is
has
encouraged
different
to be.
meaning.
And that's why when we get down to 2, you question the encouraged, because we didn't want to cross that line, and we didn't want to force that, but we're saying, it is encouraged to be.
Yeah, and again, because maybe this doesn't apply to existing, but now we're adding a unit, we're adding a driveway, we're adding a parking space, so we're wanting to encourage a design, a direction here. Again, not clear if we can mandate it.
Right, number 6, pedestrian paths shall be provided from the sidewalk or driveway to the entrance of the principal dwelling. And you were asking why a sidewalk to the principal dwelling
Yeah, that
is-
seems to have nothing to do with the ADU.
is needed. I think that
Certainly in
it was a
this,
safety issue.
in this
I
part of the
think,
regulations.
It's just part of providing appropriate pedestrian facilities, which, to encourage walkability. So having a sidewalk provides an accessible route.
Well, that's to the ADU. I'm asking why
Yeah.
we're saying anything has to be done to the principal dwelling in this part of the zoning code. Again, it's 9:51 PM, not a hill I'm going to die on. That's why I emailed these to you over the weekend.
I think you were just, it's accessibility in general, but, good question. 7, energy code.
Was not in the list of definitions above.
So we did, one of our original definitions, did you,
There's building code and fire code. I didn't see energy code.
I'm sorry, okay.
So energy code, if we could add a definition or take away the capitalization. But the energy code that's applicable in Milton is the
Stretch code.
the specialized stretch code.
And that could change the definition.
Well, so could the others that are defined
Maybe
as
we
building code.
lowercase, maybe we put that in the
Yeah, it'd be easier to
lowercase.
lowercase it.
So lowercase on energy code, that's great.
And I think later in that line, we say requiring, unless, I think we want to say requires. Unless the code requires such to be
Yes.
incorporated.
Yep. Yep, I agree, that's good. Okay, last page. Number 2, under process and procedural requirements, creation of an ADU is an expansion of the existing, or is an expansion of an existing principal dwelling or an attached accessory dwelling structure. Let's see what you have here.
I mean, this, I was just questioning what we've discussed earlier tonight. You know, should this require site plan approval? And we've discussed this topic. I don't,
All right,
No.
so we're good to leave that. Number 3, a completed application form and filing fee in an amount determined by the building department. We, in discussing this, decided, first of all, that would not be under our jurisdiction to decide what that would be, and it could also change. So if we put a set fee in there, the building department may later change the fee, we would have to go back and amend this article. So this kept, in a way, that kept it,
okay. But let's say the town of Milton decides we don't like ADUs and our fee is $1 million. Well, that's ridiculous. We get sued. Okay, it's $50,000. I mean,
the building department, I think, charges typically $100.
okay, yeah, okay.
I
I'm
think-
just saying,
But- So
making sure
we
that we're
probably
not
should be charging
unreasonably
more.
restricting them.
Discover a new
The
revenue
warrant
source
committee,
for the town.
yeah,
They're a new revenue source for the town.
exactly. But that would be under their jurisdiction, and we wouldn't have control over that, and the bylaw, the amount could change over time, so. That was language we put in there. B and C, you just had capitalized dwelling and unit on both B and C. And I think that was it for those. So we'll have a vote on, from our board on,
Do you have any other questions?
oh, sorry, yeah, any?
I don't, I'll defer. Any member of the committee have any further question on the ADU? Okay. Anybody online? Karen?
Yeah, Tom, this is Ron. I just had one
Oh,
quick
Ron, please.
question. I didn't see any language about subleasing, and I wasn't sure if that's relevant here. The 12-month language we talked about, that does give me concern around subleasing, because if someone has a 12-month lease, would a sublease also be required to be 12 months? I just don't know how that works. I don't know if it's irrelevant, if we already have the landlord and one tenant, so that just jumped out at me.
Typically, that would be up to the owner of the property if they would allow a sublet to happen. You would have a lease, and then if for some reason the tenant wanted to, couldn't fulfill or wanted to move out and you wanted to have somebody sublet that apartment, typically that would have to be approved by the landlord on that term of rental. I don't know that we could regulate.
Yeah, so subletting is not forbidden by this,
Yeah.
correct?
Okay, makes sense. Yep.
But it's a good question.
Oh, very good question.
I don't think we would have jurisdiction over that.
Any more questions concerning this article?
I was going to raise another point. So to Ron's question, because it, and I don't have it in front of me anymore, but because it says that the lease shall not be, so I think a sublease is still a lease. And I think that because it said it shouldn't be used for boarding or other commercial purposes, that language, I don't know that to Jim's point earlier, I don't know that the tenant could then turn their leased premises into like an Airbnb, even if the landlord agreed. I think that language is precluded. So I think that's fine.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone else?
Because that is a concern.
No, it's
Well, I know, I mean, you said that, so you wouldn't want the tenant to then turn around to turn it into
Right, and
an
be running it
Airbnb or
into,
something, but I don't
yeah,
think
that's why the
would
boarding
allow
and
you.
lodging was probably a general.
And Ron, thank you for bringing that up. It was a really good question. So I just have, as to the document, are we going to do like a search for that ADU, like word find and change? I was just making, and I think my second, right, yeah. So I think my second question is, do we have anything for town council to look at in this document? Are you going to vote this evening, or you have one thing you?
In this document?
Correct.
Yeah, we have that one item, but we're gonna have him look over. He has both of these.
Okay.
He has everything, but we'll send him our amended version of this for review to make sure he has that.
Okay. Okay, if nobody has any other questions and you have nothing else to add as to ADU or any more comments, could we maybe do a little overlay district housekeeping?
Yeah,
Really quick?
yeah, that's great. But do we want to vote on?
Do we need to vote on these
We need to
changes?
vote on
Yeah,
these
yeah,
changes,
okay,
first
that's
before we.
done.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the amended article of ADU?
I make motion to approve the amended article.
Okay, great.
Second.
All right, roll call. Jim?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, great, thank you. And yeah, in the housekeeping, we'll go over, Cheyenne, can you pull up this, the final map? Updated map article?
Yes, I'm just gonna save these changes really quick.
And you all have had a chance to discuss this a little bit, that these are zoning articles, overlay districts that have already been approved at town meeting. And for some reason, it was just an oversight that the map did not accompany it. So now anyone looking to do overlay development in these overlay zoned areas can have a specific map to look at. If anyone wants to add anything.
Yeah. Any questions online? No? Yeah, we, the town administrator discussed this with us at length, and the Warrant Committee likes maps, so we looked at it, talked about it. You know, big map people here.
Well, you can see the history of all the overlay zoning that's been going on, in the Milton Village and Central Avenue and the potential for future revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. Jay, you have a question?
Can I ask about a different topic?
Sure.
So there is a citizens petition, which we'll have to be thinking about, and you and I talked before the meeting, but I said I'd bring it up during the meeting. And it says the citizens petition is asking town meeting to vote to instruct the planning board, and I'm paraphrasing here, to prepare a so-called 25% plan for the May town meeting. And I was wondering if the planning board has any comments on this.
So I had told Jay just in advance, to answer, so we have not discussed this as a board. This is not one of our articles, so this is not, we have not had a chance to discuss this. So we weren't prepared to comment on this. I would refer you to town council, and I know he's advising on this.
do you know if you will have a comment as a board? I mean, it's just been, sorry.
So it's basically a mandate forcing us to do a 25% plan by May?
No, well, they're putting it on the town meeting floor. So that's the question. So I would advise speaking to town council on what actually can happen with this article. So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the time. I know we're missing one of our members, Sean Fahey, but
Yeah.
Meredith is the chair, and Cheryl, Maggie Oldfield, and Jim at home. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in. I think Jay prepared and others had a lot of great questions, but I think walking through it the way we did, while arduous, I think really educated a lot of people. Hopefully there are people watching at home and gave a better understanding of site plan and all the work you've done in the ADUs and everything for the town. So thank you from the Warrant Committee, and also thank you for the people of the town. Yes, Liz.
Lights? No lights? Lights? We're not talking about lights.
I thought we were talking about the maps.
Yeah, do we,
We did the maps.
We did. Are we going to talk about the light
That was,
bylaw?
that was.
We did maps are done?
That's, we're through with our articles, so
That's
that's a
not,
select board.
it's not a planning board
That's
article.
not a planning board article.
Oh, sorry.
That's, yeah, I know, I saw that, I should have said that in the very beginning for people who were maybe watching, that that's a select board article,
Thank
it's not a planning board
You're
article,
right.
so.
Thank you.
And the rest of the articles as well, so,
Thank you.
yeah. Great, so with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from the planning board.
So moved.
Second?
All right, roll call, Jim?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Good evening, thank you.
Thank you, great
you.
planning
Thank you
board.
for your work.
Appreciate it very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, great work.
Good.
Long nights.
Thank you for all of your work, you guys are amazing.
Second to the planning board.
Okay. Coming back on Wednesday, I'm looking to get some speakers for the lighting bylaw, and anyone else who can maybe speak to it. I know that they have a little work to do in terms of getting the review of the language for these articles. I was hoping we could come back in on Wednesday and maybe discuss these more at length and have a bigger conversation about them. And obviously, maybe we can just talk about some of the language that we made corrections on, thanks Jay, tonight. And I know there were a couple of things outstanding, but maybe at least get the majority of the conversation through. And once we get the green light from town council, maybe vote. We only have 3 weeks left until town meeting. So I trust we're gonna come back on Wednesday, and based upon the scheduling I can get from select board member and maybe others, probably 3 times next week. Okay?
So for Wednesday, you're thinking we'll mostly discuss the articles we discussed tonight?
Yeah, I like to do an in-depth discussion
Okay.
of these articles, all the planning board, and just kind of get a feeling on where the board's at after that discussion in terms of voting. So we can pull the trigger right away once town council does what he needs to do with the planning board's question. Does that sound right? I think this.
So you're thinking we won't be voting on Wednesday?
We could vote. It's on the agenda.
Okay.
I think we can vote on this. That's why I put the vote. I
Okay.
did the Dave Humphreys. We
Yeah.
put both on there, just to give us the freedom for people to come in and talk. But we can vote,
Okay.
certainly, if that's where the committee thinks we're at.
And it did sound like there were a couple items in here that, I can't read the mind of the other warrant committee members, but some items in here that we might want to say yes or no to. Individual items, maybe as an amendment.
I mean, yeah,
So do you have a-
and we can have that conversation about this, but I think it's just talking through each of the articles. These are significant things for the town, so I want to make sure that we feel comfortable in our recommendation, in the language and the verbiage of the article before this gets on the floor of town meeting. So I don't know, I think that's a meeting. I think that's a whole meeting for us, Liz.
So then, do you have any plans to have somebody come in to speak with us about the citizens petitions
I'm trying to do that.
next week sometime?
Yeah, we need someone to stand. I think I'm going to have one person to come in, and maybe somebody from the select board, or maybe a citizen. I don't know, but all fingers have me pointing at a select board member to come in.
And maybe town council?
Oh, town council, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going through with Mr. Milano and get him here for us. We've had him usually at the end in the past.
And then the lighting bylaws next week with the guest.
Yeah,
also.
that would be with the citizens petition.
At the same time.
Yeah, I'd like to probably have the same speaker, maybe for all three. I'll do my best. I started this weekend trying to find who could really accurately discuss, not accurately, but just discuss the intentions behind it, the meaning, how it came to be. We've had citizens petitions in the past. Usually the citizen or citizens will come in who've signed it. I don't know if that'll be the case, but I'm trying to find a little bit of that too, because it's kind of always good to hear some, not a town meeting member, or just, a group of people who came up with it, would come in and just kind of hear it from their perspective. So that's it. So we're going to be back here on Wednesday. Planning board, articles, full discussion, anything else we're looking to do, and a potential vote if that's where we think we're at.
Someone has their hand up.
Aman?
Chair, thank you.
I wanted to mention, since I know we were kind of in the email exchange with Mr. Lawler about, with the local historic district study committee. And I know that, you might be busy, Tom, and I was going to let you know if I need to get with you about that, filling you in, or especially if you need me to kind of communicate with them, let me know.
No, absolutely. And Aman and everyone else with our subcommittee and the various, we're going to be turning directly back to that after a special town meeting, Aman. And I've had some conversations. It's not on the agenda tonight, but with Mr. Lawfer and the historic district. So I can reach out to you individually about that.
Yeah, no, of course. Happy to talk with you about it. Just wanted to let you know.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks. They're meeting up soon, so historic district coming. Jay?
Something I mentioned to you before the meeting. So we heard from the planning board tonight about their view on all of this, and in particular, I'm thinking about the issue of, site plans for restaurants. I just want to throw out there that we might want to have someone coming in to present the other side, maybe someone who represents restaurants in town, saying, "Here's our feelings about the site plan."
We'll consider that.
It's just a thought.
We had a conversation about that before the meeting.
Yeah.
I wish it would have stayed there, but.
I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable.
We'll talk about that, and I'll give it some consideration.
Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay. I'm going to say one more thing. We got some minutes. I'm going to bring minutes back up. Minutes. So I'm going to surprise everybody with some minutes. If you could just review them when you get the email and not just see it and not open it and not look at them. Karen works really hard on them, and we have to get them done for the town. Liz?
Our comments to the warrant, have they been submitted with the warrant?
They have. We meet the deadline. Thank you, everybody who took time. Jay, Liz, everybody who took time. They were excellent. Ron, Judy. I want to really thank Julia for all your help. It was instrumental, and no one's ever stepped up like that. So thank you, Julia Maxwell. Lori for doing the school comments, taking on all three. So I just want to say it was really great. It was really great getting everyone's hand in the everyone in the mix on those, and it'll be a similar situation with the annual. Those are a little more boring, some of them, but I'm sure there'll be a couple of good ones for us to work work on individually. Okay, that's all I have. Does anybody have anything else?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. Steve? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. We are adjourned. See you on Wednesday.